Yeah.
Okay. So how do we want to start? You want to start with
Oh, I'll start. I mean,
oh, okay.
it's let's just start with a few minutes of silence.
I'll just come back.
Sure.
1 minute. Forgot my phone in the car.
So welcome to this workshop. Earlier I was thinking about the question of whether or not, I should orient today's workshop or even any of the sessions this week around a particular text. And I thought to myself, I didn't feel like it because I felt like what would be most useful really would be to make myself available to you all and to deal with, whatever individual issues you all have in your spiritual journey, because fundamentally, the actual search, the actual, tip of the spear techniques that Ramana Maharishi lays out based on the Vedantic tradition are extremely simple, extremely simple, and all the complications arise from the resistance that people have to carrying those techniques out at every waking moment. It's the attachments to our identity and to our hoped for futures and the avoidance of all the feared futures, basically, that keep us locked in our path. So, if anyone wants to right now, what I want to do is we're going to have this session, we definitely will do a good amount of meditation practice, self-inquiry and surrender. But I wanted to ask if anyone wanted to talk about, what has come up with you on your journey? What are you wrestling with? What do you want? What are you having trouble with? What do you have questions about? And let's take a gauge of the room that way. Anyone want to talk about it?
I can start. No, you go first. Please go first. No, you go first.
I'm not directly familiar with Ramana Maharishi's technique.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been listening to some Gita sessions from Swami Tadatmananda. He's has a center in New Jersey somewhere. And so I learned many things from there. I also went to a meditation practice for TM session.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Transcendental meditation?
yeah. So I took their classes and So that one I try to practice maybe 20 minutes a day. So I still have confusion about that identity thing you said.
Yes.
And, you know, and I understand they say, oh, Atma is Paramatma and everyone has the same consciousness. And I understand logic concept. But seemingly it looks like, yeah, my identity is with my ego.
Yes.
When I see, oh, even I can understand, oh, my body is something which you die and you give up. But I still think, oh, when you reborn, whatever they call it Sukshma Sharir, and that carries out, and then you take birth again. So I thought, that's my identity, it seems like.
Yes. Yes.
That's what I'm associating with.
Yes.
Right? But seems like Gita is saying, no, that's not my identity. My identity is with Atma, which is Paramatma, which means that all of us have the same identity. So I'm confused about that.
Well, that's good. No, okay, so look, so it's oh, go ahead. No, well,
So that's one thing.
Yes.
And then of course when
Sure.
I'm trying to do meditation, I mean I still have trouble because I cannot concentrate. You know.
Sure. So what you're talking about, which is yes, it feels like unperson, right? Is it's for a very good reason, because this is a very powerful illusion that's at work, right? So you can read the Gita, you can read these different scriptures, and they can give you logical reasons, very logical reasons why, in fact, you're not the body, you're not the mind, you're not this, you're not that, right? But the logical reasons are not sufficient, you know? They are only motivational.
Right.
What you really want is direct experience of the truth.
Yes.
Yes.
And the only way to get direct experience of the truth is to focus the mind on self-inquiry or surrender, which I will explain those techniques in a little bit again, because it's worth reiterating them again and again and again. But those are, you know, Maharishi's techniques, and again, techniques that are, he's distilled them from the Vedantic tradition, of course. But those techniques are the techniques by which the illusion may be pierced. So, you know, what you're talking about is, in fact, the only way the mind can conceive of things, right? The mind is built in a way where the functioning of the mind is automatically stemming from the illusion of individual personhood. So, yeah, it makes complete sense. There is an illusion at work. It's a very basic, powerful, primal illusion, Maya. And it's not sufficient just to read about the fact that we're not that we are Paramatman. You have to experience it. The only way to experience it is to apply the practice and apply it in such a way as continuously as possible, which will run up against the attachments. Why does it run up against the attachments? It's because when you turn your attention towards the practice, there's the fear that I can't put effort towards these other things because I'm focused on the practice. So whereas, you know, because you're talking about doing TM for 20 minutes, which is, you know, which is good, but it's, you know, these methods are ultimately you're meant to be attempted to be performed all the time, right? And so there's a part of us that, because we're identified with the person, is like, well, if I'm doing that, how can I attend to all the things that need my attention, that need my effort, you know? And then what happens is that those thoughts about the fears and hopes and all that then get fed back into the practice itself. So for example, right, if you're doing self-inquiry, right, well, yeah, but who's going to pay the bills? Well, that thought then gets subjected itself to self-inquiry. Like, who is afraid? Who is it that's having this thought about the bills? Who is it that's having this thought about my kids? Who is it that's having this thought about my health or my career or whatever else may be the case? So the attachments are basically very afraid of ceding control. And they hold you back from the truth as a result, because their fear is that, yeah, if you lose control, your life will go to hell, basically. So, yeah. So that's that. And then in terms of, you know, trouble concentrating, yeah, I mean, trouble concentrating is it is, it's in a way the whole ball game, right? Because again, concentration is something which is made harder by the attachments that one has, and also the organization of the attachments. There's different ways of dealing with it, you know. Of course, to a large extent, concentration is created just through practice, like building a muscle or something like that. But there might be other issues depending on exactly what's going on. So, I'm a big proponent for a lot of people of getting really good therapy, which is not necessarily something that has been talked about a lot in the, traditional Vedantic community. But then again, they had different ways of dealing with those kinds of things in the past. I feel like in the modern world, a lot of people are carrying around a lot of emotional baggage, and that is a heavy weight on the ability to do the spiritual practice. So many times people will run into a kind of dead end or impasse, and they won't feel motivated, they aren't unable to concentrate for long periods of time, they don't get anywhere, and it's because there are unconscious processes at work. I mean, in the Vedanta tradition, you have certainly the notion of the unconscious. You have the vasanas, you have the samskaras, you have things that are in the subtle and causal realms that are controlling what's happening. But they don't have as much of a concept of how to deal with it therapeutically. It's more through ritual and perhaps, perhaps in a different context things were dealt with differently, right? Because you go to an ashram and maybe your guru would be a kind of therapist of a sort. Now it's different. But anyway, so I put that out there as a broad category, right? Trouble concentrating is really, it's the whole ball game in a sense, yeah.
So how do we access this trouble? Like, how do we figure out? I understand it's the attachments, but how do you figure out the
what's going on exactly?
Yeah, because I meditate 60, 75, 90 minutes, and I still find that my mind is just busy. It's still very busy.
Yeah.
And I understand surrender, but I'm just not sure, like, surrender during meditation. Whatever troubles me, I surrender, right? I surrender to the Lord. Well, simplistically, like, I surrender. That, okay, this is beyond me, there's nothing I can do about this, and I need the Lord, the universe, to help me take care of it or whatever. But the chatter
keeps going.
Keeps going.
Yeah, well, it will for a while. So this is, I think, a good segue. Let's talk about these techniques. I think not everybody has complete understanding of the Ramana Maharshi techniques, which, by the way, I'll also add immediately that what I'm going to say about these techniques and the practice we do about them is really just the bare framework, okay? Because really fundamentally, when you do either of these techniques, and you can also mix and match, they teach you what they are as you do them. What really is surrender? What really is surrender? What really is self-inquiry?
Yes.
Well, as you do it, it will teach you what it is. Because, you start out with one conception of what it is, and then you do it, and then you're like, oh, I thought it was that, now I realize it's this, and on it goes. And the ultimate end of that process will be that, the truth is, right, that these practices are actually not practices at all. They are descriptions, you might say, of what you actually are, right? Surrender is really, truthfully not a practice. It is one's nature. One is surrender. One is self-inquiry in a very profound way. But anyway, so it's like peeling an onion at the end. In the center of the onion is nothing, or seemingly nothing. So yeah, let's go into surrender, because what you're talking about is the chattering mind. There's a lot of things that come into it. It very well could be psychological stuff. It is psychological stuff for a lot of people. But the other thing I would say is, meditating again in a very like a chunk-like way for 60 or 90 minutes. It is very good. I'm not going to say it's not, but what Maharishi recommended, and what I recommend as well, is the attempt to try these techniques continuously. So not just sitting down, because what happens is, what is the chatter coming from? First of all, I can say a lot of things, but the chatter is coming from the attachments.
Yes.
If you want to start burning up the attachments, you have to start giving opportunities for those thoughts to come, like in real-world situations, where you're actually dealing with the relevant stuff. And then they get fed into this sort of grinder of the practice of either surrender or inquiry. When they get fed into the grinder, it weakens them, basically. Because, for example, right, so self-inquiry is about pointing out fundamentally this, first of all, this unknown factor that you don't know who you are. Even before you figure out who you are, at least as important, maybe even more almost more important for a large part of the search is really allowing the knowledge that you don't know who you are to fully penetrate. You see, that is huge. People are afraid of it. People are afraid of that not knowing, actually, because that will totally upturn your life. So what happens is, right, the chatter is connected to some fears and desires, etc., right? Yeah. If you then say, well, yeah, but who is it really that's having this thought about whatever it is, right? And then you come to this sense of, well, I don't know, actually. Yeah. Well, if you don't know, immediately that thought loses some of its power, because you care about it because it's you. Basically, you care about everything because it's mine. But when we confront the fact that I don't know what I even mean by the word mine, then naturally these thoughts lose some of their power, right? That's basically what you're confronting it with. So, so let's start with surrender, though, just because surrender is very interesting. So, it's, I was actually just reading, beautiful Mandukya Upanishad Karaka, Gaudapada's Karaka, which he so, succinctly lays out surrender, basically, and he says, essentially keep your mind away from the objects of the world, more or less, and then, bring it to a state of peace. But then he says that state of peace is not enough. That state of peace, that bliss, you should not become attached to that state of bliss, but you should continue essentially to surrender even that. So anyway, so this is basically laying out the general idea, but the way I like to describe surrender is that you are attempting to, this word is a little misleading, so I'm going to explain it in a second, but essentially ignore everything. I could say ignore every thought, or I could say ignore everything. Ignore everything and refrain from using your willpower on anything except the practice of surrender itself. So the practice of surrender becomes a kind of vigilance, right? You are watching and you are continuously noticing these various things that are occurring, right? What do I say various things? I mean, everything you're seeing, hearing, touching, and tasting and feeling, everything that you're emotionally experiencing, everything that you're thinking, right? Everything that you're dreaming, imagining, all your memories, all your hopes, dreams, fears, all your logic, right? All of that is a realm of thought, right? So in surrender, basically, you start with a certain degree of faith, essentially. Surrender is a little bit of a faith-driven practice. That's why it's so connected to the Bhakti tradition. And if you surrender it all to God, then you're saying, all this is illusion. None of it concerns me. It's all white noise. It's all irrelevant. Okay? And I'm not going to treat any of it as real. And I'm not going to, therefore, exert what feels like my voluntary willpower on any of it. Right? Because, for example, just like, if you knew there were, there was a picture of a cup of water, you wouldn't extend your hand to go grasp it because it's the picture, right? So in the same way, you wouldn't treat anything that you're experiencing as real, basically. So this is the basic idea of surrender. Ignore everything, don't use your willpower, accept, this is the critical exception on the practice itself. So you're keeping your attention, essentially, this is a concentration practice of a sort. You are keeping your attention, you're continuously noticing the illusory nature of everything. You're reminding yourself, okay, this is unreal. This is all unreal. It's like just like if you were sitting in a cave somewhere and you were hallucinating all of this. This was a big dream. Except you have to keep reminding yourself of this fact, essentially. That's what surrender is. The practice of surrender is this continuous reminder, don't take anything seriously. This is all completely unreal. So practicing that continuously. Of course, it's scary at times, and it's very difficult. But
it's
yes,
scary, it's difficult. And in this transactional world though, how do you do that all the time?
Yeah,
If
yeah.
I'm transacting with someone,
Well,
it involves my body, it involves my mind, it involves my thought, right? Like,
yeah. So the basic principle at work here is that, you see, the fundamental idea here is the idea that you are the transactor is wrong. That's an illusion. The idea that you are the doer of any of your actions, the idea that you are the enjoyer or sufferer of any of your actions, all of that is a product of illusion. Of course, it feels like that, I know, but it's an illusion. You are no more that than you are a character in a movie when you're sitting in the theater. But it feels like you are. I know it feels like you are. But that feeling has to be scrutinized, basically. So in the process of surrender, what happens is you, I say scrutinized, it's really a little bit more an inquiry kind of word. But essentially what happens is when you do surrender, right, what you are saying essentially is, I'm not bothered with anything that happens, right? I cede control over anything that happens, and in exchange, I get the extraordinary gift of living without effort, which is bliss, actually. You know, this is another way of looking at this, by the way, right? So, you know, of course, I do think, right, very much that seekers, there's always paradoxes in this. Seekers should seek liberation, even though it's also true that, you know, as is said in many places, you know, we're already that. We are already the self. We're already liberated. We're already liberated. It's true. Nevertheless, it's necessary to seek liberation for a while. At the same time, I also want to say a third thing is surrender, especially surrender, is the practice itself is a gift, you know? Even before attaining moksha, so to say, the practice itself is a perpetual gift because you're freed instantly. The moment you stop, the moment you let go, in that moment you're immediately freed. So anyway, so being a transactor is an illusion. Now, well, how will I live? How will things go? The reality is that the truth is, right now you aren't making things go. It seems like you are, but you're not.
Yeah.
You know, Ramana says this beautiful metaphor of, he says it's like the, you know, temples have these kind of like gargoyles that seem to be holding the pillars up, but they're not. They're decorative, okay? So it's exactly the same way with people, you know? We think we are doing things through our effort, like I'm making this happen, but you're not. Actually, I mean, there's so many ways you can look at this, like 1,000 different ways. It's a very critical point, actually, because you could look at science. You can look at many different perspectives. Everything agrees. Like this idea that we're in control and that we are exerting free will doesn't make the least bit of sense. You know, even just very simple point, right? Are you producing the next thought that comes to mind?
I don't, I mean, it's automatic.
Exactly.
We don't have
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The next thought that comes to mind, the next emotion that comes to mind, it all just comes, right? So, and yet that's what runs your life, right? What happens is the thought or emotion comes in, we're like, oh, I made that happen. which is by the way the next thought that comes. That's also coming in that same stream, you know. It's like I give the metaphor sometimes of and repeat my metaphors. Forgive me if you've heard this before, but you know, it's like if you're living in a tall building, okay, and you're living on the 16th floor or something like that, okay, and someone drops a brick from the top of the building, okay, and you look out the window, and it passes by your window for 0.1 seconds, right, from the top of the building past the 16th floor down to the bottom, right, and then you say, I made that happen. That's what we're doing all the time, basically, right? Because the thought came from somewhere, we don't know where it came from, and it's going somewhere, we don't know where it's going. right? And we take credit for it.
Okay.
So this is the power of the illusion at work. Now, again, I know, challenging the illusion directly is very difficult, right? So, that's why, so.
You mean you think of the thought as you produce the thought?
Yeah, we say that, exactly. Because the thought is actually coming from forces that we don't see, and it's going into effects that we don't see. But we take credit, like, I thought this, but it's clearly not true. The thought was created by something else. Call it God, call it karma, call it what you want. But it certainly isn't you. It's not you in the sense that you think you are anyway.
Yeah.
You in the self maybe, but like not in you in the individual person sense. Individual person is a product, really, of that stream issuing from somewhere else. Does that make sense?
I'm working on it.
Yeah, it's going to take some time.
Your conclusion is there is no free will, basically?
I mean, there is no free will, 100%. I mean, the way I would say, is it's useful to think of there being just enough free will to practice the spiritual practice. And the reason that's okay, think that, is because the practice really, again, it's paradoxical, but it's very true, is it's not really something different than what's already happening. These practices are actually what's already going on, but it seems like it's not, in the same way that it seems like you're a person. These are very, very counterintuitive ideas, right? The reality is, right, someone's saying, you're not a person at all. I mean, it's really true that you're not, right? How could it possibly be? But the answer is because there's very, very, very subtle illusion at work. And only by extreme concentration can that illusion be discerned. So the whole structure of the search is calm the mind down. It's like you're trying to you're trying to read some extremely small text. A book written in very small font or something like that. And you're reading it on a carousel that's spinning fast. Okay, like already it's hard to read, and the carousel is spinning fast. That's like the mind. Okay. It's impossible, right? So if you want to read the text, you have to slow the carousel down as much as you possibly can, right? And then apply your concentration like crazy, right? And then you'll read the text eventually. It's a little bit like that.
Can we look at it through the lens of choice points? So you said it's paradoxical that even though we think we are practicing surrender, everything is already happening.
Yeah.
And yet we need to exert effort in the spiritual seeking.
Correct.
So does that mean we are kind of trying to choose at every juncture? As in, what do I choose to pay attention to? Like, do I choose to put my effort into surrendering, or do I choose to just go with the illusion?
Right. Yeah. That's the only relevant choice, I would say. We should say we are capable of making that choice.
So that's the only iota of free will that we have.
Yes, correct. That's exactly right. Yes, exactly. That's the if there's any iota of free will, that's the only one. Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And that's an illusion too.
And that's an illusion too. It's an illusion too.
You're making use of the illusion.
You're making use of the illusion, and that illusion is grounded in reality to some extent. You see, because it's sort of like again, forgive me if I've said these things before to some extent, but I fall back to the same metaphors often, because it's as if, for example, you really were, this is not a perfect metaphor, but it's as if you really thought right now you were, I don't know, in Zimbabwe or something like that, different country right now, right? You thought you were in a different country right now, and I said, okay, well let's play a game. Let's pretend you were in California, Let's pretend you're in California, but you are in California, So there's a sense in which it's effortless in a sense to be in California because you are in California. I mean, it's not a perfect metaphor because the reality is even the pretending part, even that is not. That's also baked into the truth. So you see. There's a lot of paradox to the mind that's going on here. The reality is, right, it's, as Ramana says, as the Upanishads say, right, what you actually are is currently unaffected by ignorance, is currently unaffected by the illusion of individuality, right? So then what exactly is it that is bound is the question. What is it that feels like it's suffering? What is it that feels like it has these burdens and efforts and has to do this and that and blah, blah, blah? Well, that's the question. You have to investigate what that is, and then when what that is investigated, it turns out not to exist, which is crazy, right? So what was it that was seeking? In the process of seeking, the thing that seemed to be seeking is not seeking. The thing that seemed to be ignorant was not ignorant. And there's no finding of that fact either, because whoever was looking for that fact doesn't seem to have existed. And who notices that? I mean, this is the paradox at work. There's something very, very mind-blowing about this whole thing, right? There's something very, very strange, is the truth, right? This is magic, right? It's really what it is.
What is also not there.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. So there's something very strange. But I will just say one thing as well, right? So what's said on the Gita, right? So, surrender and self-inquiry, which I really should go into now, both of them, but are the most direct challenges to the attachments and to the identity, right? But there is a step which, even though I'm going to say it's quote unquote easier step, it's very difficult as well. It's just that it's a little bit easier than those two, which is karma yoga. So what's the difference? Karma yoga says, go ahead. You think you're the doer of your actions? Go ahead, be the doer. Go ahead, pretend you're that doer. Go ahead, engage in the illusion of doing, but try to do it with an attitude of equanimity, right? Do it with this attitude that, okay, I'm going to do, but I'm going to try to be indifferent emotionally as to the results. The results are God's. I'm just engaging in the process as a duty, and also with the attitude that I'm merely an instrument of the divine. I'm not really doing it, right? This is an attitude, right? Mm-hmm. But the difference is that you are permitting yourself to use your willpower on various transactional things in the world. Yeah. So this is still very useful. It is purifying for the mind, and it's not as directly challenging as surrender and inquiry if you practice them all the time, basically. So let's keep that in mind. So, sorry, I think you had a question as well.
Yeah, so just a quick background. My name is Raj. Grew up in a Jain family, but really studied, most of my study has been Vedanta through Chinmaya Mission. Mm-hmm. Also gone to Vipassana twice, and find that kind of meditation to be actually the best for me. Mm-hmm. Conclusion I've come to, and I want to check if my understanding is correct, is that in order to have the experience, I accept the explanation for Tattvamasi Aham Brahmasmi, that I am, the I that's listening to you, the I that's preparing my next question while listening to you at the same time, the part that's also watching me do that, it's all, who is it? Mm-hmm. I get that. So in terms of the experience, what I've come to the following, that you can't really fall asleep. You can prepare yourself to sleep, and sleep sucks you in.
Yeah.
In terms of the experience, it's also the same way. I can only prepare myself and just wait for the divine to give me the experience.
Yes.
Do I have that right?
Yes, you do. 100%. Yeah. So your task is to attempt to do the practice as much as you possibly can, to weaken the attachments as much as you possibly can. But then once you do that, there's a threshold which only God can get you over. Yeah.
So then another question is, okay. So one of the preparation I see right now we are in the same study group. We are doing chapter 16 of the Gita, where it talks about 26 virtues you work on. All that's preparation.
Yes.
Okay. You talked about meditation for 70 minutes is great.
Yeah.
But that's actually an intense practice to do it throughout the day. I accept that too. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I'm trying to do that. I'm observing myself talking to you, observing myself while talking to you, also thinking about the next question, all of that. I lost my question. I'm observing that too. I lost my question.
That's okay, it comes back.
I'm 68, I'm allowed off.
That's okay, no worries. That's okay, you can always bring it up later. But so let's try a little surrender right now, just to see what it's like. And I always tell people, I like nothing wrong with closing your eyes, but you know, it's a good idea to keep them open, I feel like, because you can, you know, apply that in real world situations, you know, essentially. So what I would suggest is so what is surrender again? You're just essentially not allowing your attention to get absorbed in any of the particular mental phenomena that are going on, right? So when I say ignore everything, one thing I don't want you to take away from that is that you have to forcibly repress or suppress anything. That's not the case, right? Any thought, any feeling is welcome in your mind, not a problem. Whether it be good or bad, or doesn't matter what it is, right? It can be there. Your task is not to push anything out. It's merely to keep that awareness that this is a phenomenon. This is a phenomenon, it's like a passing light show, and it's not to be taken as real. It's a mirage, right? The mirage can be there. You're not saying, go away, mirage. You're simply saying, I'm recognizing this as a mirage. I'm not going to take it seriously. I'm not going to exert what feels like my willpower. When I say not exert my willpower, what I mean is, therefore, that whatever happens, whatever the body and mind do, has to be done essentially like, I'm going to relax, essentially. You're taking that, I'm going to relax. And my body and mind are like, they're like somebody else, basically. They're like over there. And whatever they do by themselves, without me, is fine. And if that means they just sit down on the couch and look at the wall for the next 30 hours, that's okay. And if they want to go up and do things, that's also okay. That's their problem. Because I'm not them. They're part of the hallucination. So this is the basic idea behind surrender. So let's try it for just 5 minutes, yeah? And see.
Give the rules for surrender. What is supposed to watch? You only watch the thoughts, right?
Yeah, basically, sit there, watch and ignore everything. Ignore again, meaning simply this: that you recognize that it is passing phenomena, and you don't allow your attention to get sucked in. So I would describe that as, right. So you know. For example, right, it's I think I gave this example last year actually, but I'll say it again because I think it's very apt, which is, you know, if you're looking out, let's say, out a beautiful window and, you know, at a gorgeous landscape, okay, outside, right, and you could be mesmerized by it, right? It's beautiful, and your mind is there, right, and then you forget yourself, right? I mean, it's a peaceful experience. Don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful experience. But the point is that your attention has gotten lost in the phenomena. It can also be negative, by the way. In this case, it's a positive phenomenon. It's a beautiful phenomenon. It could be also very ugly. But the point is that your attention has gotten lost. Right now, it's at that moment, right, you hear the doorbell ring. Suddenly, your attention is like back. Like, oh yeah, I'm here, right? So you want to essentially keep ringing that doorbell for yourself. Continuously. That's what surrender is. You want to bring your attention back again and again and again and again and again, right?
That's single thoughtedness.
Yes, single thoughtedness, exactly. You can view it as single thoughtedness achieved by this series, repetitive, bringing attention back, you know, because your attention will go out for a second. That's okay. You just bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. And, you know, at the same time, it's really sides of a coin. You're not going to use your willpower. Why would you use your willpower if it's fake, right? If you know it's a fake phenomenon, you wouldn't use your willpower. Conversely, if you don't use your willpower, you will see it as a fake phenomenon. So that's all that surrender is. So yeah, let's try it for 5 minutes and then see what your experiences are.
It was difficult to keep the eyes open.
Yeah.
It's just probably just training of other meditation practices.
Yeah.
And secondly, the thoughts were random. Sometimes the thoughts were easy to catch. Sometimes you went to the moon and then caught yourself.
Exactly. That's good. That's good. It's good you're even noticing that, actually. You know. Yeah. Absolutely.
I heard in today's lecture, I was listening to Swami Sarvabhayananda, and he was talking about dharana, dhyan and samadhi. So dharana is basically keeping your mind in one place. Dhyan is keeping your mind in time. Like right now, we are in this place and we were meditating for 5 minutes. So that's a time. And samadhi is further deeper state of mind, which is on an object, right? So maybe it's your deity or your mantra, ishta mantra or something like that. That's how we describe, that's what kind of popped into my mind when we were thinking like, okay, this is the place, this is the place, this is the room, my mind should be in this place, and the defined time is 5 minutes, and then whatever I can concentrate on my Ishta mantra, so that's what I try to keep it, but I couldn't keep my eyes open. I had to close my eyes because I feel like when you keep your eyes open, you immediately get involved in this world 100%. So that's why I had to keep my eyes closed. I cannot keep my eyes open.
Got it. Well, it's something with practice it'll get a little easier.
Okay.
But I will just say, right? If you take the practice of surrender to be its own kind of meditation, right, separate from on a mantra or an Ishadevata or something like that, right? The simple thing you're doing is not what makes surrender and self-inquiry extremely special. Is though they are concentration practices, they are not concentration practices on a specific object. In fact, really, because they go by really away from the objects, you see? Like, can I recognize all of this and keep my attention back from them? And as one does that, immediately one recognizes, oh, I'm actually caught in a different thought now, As one ignores one set of thoughts, there's another set of thoughts that one is inevitably caught in next.
Yeah.
And then that is ignored, right? And so the thoughts become over time subtler and subtler and subtler. And so there's a kind of like, there's a little hole in experience. And you're following that hole down into something. So that makes it a little different. That's what makes these so special, because they're not on an already defined object. They're on something which you're kind of finding your way towards in some sense. Although this is really just like just relaxing away from. I mean, though there is a lot of effort, because the effort. Where is the effort? The effort's required because of the huge pull of the attachments. Like you said, hard to even keep your eyes open.
Yeah.
That's how strong the attachments are.
It is.
So yeah.
But
Go ahead, and then we'll go to you again.
okay, so what I thought of that eventually it should go to that place, that surrendering place. If we keep on practicing at least on some path, then it should lead to that state.
Yeah,
That's what I feel like. That's how should I go forward, right? That's what
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that's true, right? Where we all do what we can do,
Right.
and if that's done with sincerity, it does lead you to the next place. Yeah.
So the controlling the breath or the watching the breath also controls the mind.
Yes.
Is that also object, right? Breath
That's
is
an
not-
object, 100% an
So
object.
that's not the right way to.
Well, it could be, like she was mentioning, it can be kind of preparatory is the way I would see it, right? So if you quiet the mind, it lays the framework for these deeper practices. So, just like Karma Yoga also quiets the mind, right?
Yes, so pranabandhanat linamanasam ekachindanat nasimetidaha. That is the Upadesha Shastra.
Yeah, exactly. So I think when you quiet the mind, I mean, if you use breath control to quiet the mind, it then can make surrender easier. For example,
Yes.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not in itself surrender, is what I
Correct.
would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not the surrender technology. It's just control the breath to
Yes.
take you to control the mind. No other thoughts will come.
It's easier then. Exactly. That's correct. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So I feel don't have to do anything. Everything exists as it is, and you are not deeply caught in anything. So
Yes.
that's all
That's surrender, yeah.
So I am not even bothered. Everything exists as it is. I am not bothered about anything around me, and I'm not caught in anything. And I'm not chasing any method to make my mind to concentrate on anything. That's a kind of a feeling. Not feeling, the existence.
That's beautiful. I mean, only thing I would just say there is, right, yes, I mean, so surrender does, I mean, that's also another advantage of both surrender and self-inquiry is, over time, they generate peace, right? And that's the kind of honey that they use to keep you going. Because as you start these practices and you start to experience the bliss associated with them, it makes you want to do more of it over time.
Yeah, so I do not even want to say I have to really close my eyes, or I have to focus on this, or focus on like idle or anything of the sort.
But your mind will be wandering though, right?
No, mind also doesn't wander. Everything exists and I am not caught in anything, kind of.
So the only thing I would say, right, is from the surrender viewpoint is, I mean, that's in the right direction. But if you take surrender very seriously, then you have to say this too is a thought.
Yes.
So whatever you're experiencing, right, so including peace, is also a thought. What we're trying with these practices is to get to something that does not come and go. We're trying to get something which is like beyond time, right? So in order to do that, we have to regard everything that comes and goes as an experience. So for example, if you have an experience of peace defined by the fact that it started at some point, right, then it will end at some point. And that makes it an experience, that makes it a thought, and that makes it insufficient, right? So you have to go beyond that as well. So there is a kind of fight, right? Yeah, I know it can be extremely beautiful and peaceful, but this is why Gaudapada says in the Karaka, bliss is not sufficient, right? You must not become attached to bliss, but you have to keep your mind aloof from it. That is to say, surrender that too. Meaning keep your attention not absorbed in the state of peace, but back to you, whatever that means, right? Away from the objects. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a fight in a sense to stay awake, you know? There's a fight to stay awake. Awake as in not absorbed in any particular experience. Everything is a particular experience, the problem. So when you withdraw your mind, where is it going? Where is it going? Well, the answer is self-inquiry is the answer. This is the other side of the coin. So surrender basically says, all these things are occurring, I'm going to withdraw my attention from the objects, okay? And relax, basically, otherwise.
But there is an active observer. Like I noticed there's continuous, because you also said don't exert will, right? Like
Yes,
don't exert your
correct.
will, and if you
That's
find
right.
yourself exerting will, that means you're, I guess, working too hard to surrender, right? It's not actually.
Well, no. I should clarify. So you don't want to exert your will on any of the tasks of the world.
Okay.
Or yes. In other
No,
words, you
just
don't-
in those 5 minutes.
Yes.
Right?
You shall be exerting your will, definitely. You're going to be exerting your will to do the surrender practice.
To do the surrender
That's
practice.
correct.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
very
Then
correct.
it's okay.
Yes.
But what I was noticing is that there is still an observer, because there was like the thoughts.
Yes.
They come randomly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they actually surprised me. You know, what was coming up? I
Yes.
was like, oh,
Yes.
oh, that's interesting that
Yes.
this is coming.
Yes.
Oh, wait, I suddenly heard like my music teacher singing in my head, and totally random, right? Like we cannot predict what's coming up. But then
Yes.
I'm observing that,
Yes.
and then there's a part of me that's finds it interesting. So there is, it's so I still have to like say, oh, there is, who is finding it interesting?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
Who is the one finding this?
I mean, so you know, you're mixing in a little self-inquiry, right? Which is not a bad thing. But I would definitely say, you know, first of all, right, it's very good that you're observing those thoughts in a sense, and that, you know, there's different layers here, but it can be extremely helpful to notice the patterns in those thoughts, because those thoughts are not fully random, you know, they are linked in a certain way, right? So if you start to notice, oh yeah, I keep thinking about X or Y or Z, that says something about your attachments, basically, what's going on in your mind. It may not be necessarily obvious what that means, but if you keep observing, it will become clear over time.
But one other thing I noticed initially in the first few minutes is also just a kind of a letting go. There was like this complete melting down of everything. Just in the first few minutes.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, exactly. It is very much letting go. It is very much letting go. That's exactly what surrender is, right? It's just like dropping a boulder into the ocean, you know, it's just like falling.
Okay.
That's what you want. Just fall from everything, fall away from everything, right? This is why in Buddhism, non-grasping, let go. It is letting go.
But then the thoughts come up, and then there is a grasping.
Yes, and then you let go and let go and let go again.
I want to run with this.
Yes.
And then there's the backing off, the letting go, and then there was also, like you mentioned something about just observe yourself as like in a distance.
Right, you treat yourself as if treat your body and mind as if they're somebody else.
Yeah,
basically.
so it's kind of like you're unblending, right? You're basically just unblending,
Yes.
so that you are in yourself and
Yes.
everything becomes an object, sort of like
Yes.
Purusha Prakriti.
Yes, exactly. That's right. So, but what is the Purusha part is the question,
who is the
right?
Purusha?
Exactly.
Who is the Purusha?
The reality is, right, what seems like Purusha will over time reveal itself to be layers and layers and more Prakriti.
Yes.
You know, so those are stripped away, and then what's really at the bottom, right? Or what's inside once you break the seed open and then break that open, what's at the bottom of it? You know, well, surrender will eventually reveal it to you. But yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
Just want to make sure I was doing it the right way.
No, you're doing it the right way. And also, again, like I say, right, you know, as you do it, as you practice it, as you try it in your waking life all the time, right? I mean, every waking moment means you're trying it ideally, right, as you're cooking, as you're walking, as you're talking, as really, I shouldn't even say it like that, right? I shouldn't even say it like while you're doing something else. The real reality is what you want to do is I'm surrendering, and if the body and mind choose to be cooking while I'm surrendering, that's its choice, you see. And if it chooses not to do it, that's its choice also. You have to let go of control. That's the whole, that's what surrender means.
I can't make sense of that. Because I have
5 minutes we can do.
even within the 5 minutes, I solved a few problems. It's like, and then I just caught myself, what am I doing?
That is the most critical part of
That's the most critical part of surrender. Yes.
But
yes.
the thing is, like you were talking about the baggages and all the stuff that we have. So is it possible that if we work out those baggages, then the practice becomes easier?
Yeah, it does.
Right?
Exactly,
It becomes
yes.
because you say the practice is happening. It's happening all the time. I mean, we are
the practice.
We are
the practice. Well, that's right. Yes, correct. That's
and
right.
we are just caught in the illusion.
That's right.
And so we should be in that state all the time, right? Like
Yes.
that is our true state.
Yes.
And so something is missing there. Like
Yes.
that's what we are trying to figure out. Why we are not Satchidananda all the time. Like,
Yeah, I mean, there's two
know.
different things, right? So there's a psychological. So when you say cheating your baggage, right? There's different dials you have basically. So for example, right? I mean, just take I said psychological. But there's also even physical, right? Just take a simple example, right? Let's suppose you're very hungry. Okay. Well, if you're very hungry, it's hard to surrender in that moment. I mean, it's possible technically, but it's harder. Okay. Your mind is agitated by that. So there's nothing wrong with eating something, you know. And that quiets your mind. Having, let's say, a balanced diet where you're not extremely hungry, it's fine. That's a way of reducing your baggage in a very like rational way, and that does make the practice easier.
Yukta
You know?
ahara viharasya. Like there is a shloka in Bhagavad Gita.
Yes,
right?
yes. Don't eat too much or too little. Don't sleep too much or
right
too
eating,
little.
the right sleeping,
Exactly.
the
Yes,
right
yes,
exercise.
exactly. So that's an example, right? So, and you can also view, right, all the moral injunctions in the Gita, right? Be compassionate, be forgiving, etc., etc. These are all really, ultimately, you can view them as selfish because they're there for the seeker to help make their mind quieter, basically.
Right.
If you don't create fights with people, then your mind will be quieter, and you can then attain spiritual peace more easily, basically. So yes, yeah, that's how I view that. So if you reorganize, you have these kinds of attachments, and if you feel, a good diet, a moral life, good psychological work, you rearrange them so that they are less in conflict with each other, basically, then you'll have done yourself a service in terms of making the practice of the surrender or self-inquiry easier too, basically. Although, technically speaking, surrender and inquiry can overcome everything by themselves, but one has to have, intense motivation for that. Whereas the problem is the motivation is going to be difficult. If you're weighed down by these other things, the motivation to do the practice will be difficult to obtain. So
is the purpose is to be constantly there? Like purpose of practicing surrender is so that you are in a state of surrender all the time?
The purpose of practicing surrender is that surrender, by its nature, will start, like you said, to unblend you from your identifications. Okay. Right? It will start to break the attachments in various ways, because as you do surrender, you'll eventually start to see, like, oh, this is so peaceful. It's so wonderful to let go. I like not having to put effort into things. This is great. And as you do that, right, everything else will become less and less appealing, because why am I putting my hand behind my head to touch my nose? Why am I going through all this effort to get happiness from some small crumb? You know, all this work, all this effort, all this waiting, all this uncertainty, like go do this, to do that, to do that, to do that. So I can hopefully get a little bit of pleasure versus I can just let go and immediately I'm filled with peace, right? This is what's going to eventually happen, right? So that becomes like a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. Exactly, that's right, exactly. It starts to break, everything else is like, I don't care about that anymore. Why do I care? You know, those things will start to pale, and as those things lose importance, surrender gains in importance. The desire for, you know, ultimate peace, ultimate realization gains in force, basically. So that's what happens.
So Akilesh, a question regarding to the practice, relating to the practice, right? So instead of doing this 24/7, and like you said, you know,
you can sleep, you know, 16 is
16, right? It's a tall order again because because like you mentioned rightly, because of the fear that comes in terms of obligations, and so what if the practice is constrained to times when you're not attending to your personal survival or to ordained duties?
Yeah. So
if you did it rest of the time, wouldn't it then permeate this as well on its own?
It'll help.
And is that a good way to instead of being a non-starter, perhaps if I could practice it?
Yes.
All the time when I'm not doing an ordained duty, or something for my survival, like eating or earning a living, whatever it is, right?
Yes.
If I do it outside of that, wouldn't it permeate this as well?
Yeah, it will.
Would that be a good practice?
Yes, it would be good. So what I would suggest is, look, I mean, basically the idea is, there's a kind of ladder of spiritual practices, right? The ones at the top are harder, the ones at the bottom are easier, right? And if you can do something at all times, that would be good.
Yeah.
So whatever you can do, right? So you're right, if it's too difficult to do, surrender or inquiry in a particular moment, then I would definitely recommend you do karma yoga during that moment.
Yeah,
if you can't do karma yoga at that moment, then if you can even say God's name during that moment, that would be good, So something, anything is better than nothing. And if you can't do a practice, can you listen to, a scripture? Can you listen to Maharishi? That's good, right? Whatever you can do, absolutely. Even, actually, there's a fun story from one of the Buddhist scriptures where the Buddha says something like, okay, if you do all these practices that I'm telling you, in 7 years or something like that, you'll be fully enlightened, right? Then he says, in 3.5 years, if you do it, even then you'll be enlightened, right? And then he reduces it, and he says, finally, even 1 second of it is sufficient, And that's true. That's true. Because it will take you on a ride, That said, of course, right, you should keep in mind, right, that, which will happen automatically, that, it's a road, right? So again, how fast do you want to travel along that road, And so the desire for this builds automatically with time, right? And they say in many different traditions, including of course, Vedanta, that, when you want it as much as a dying person wants air, essentially, or, someone who is on fire and wants to douse the fire, right? When you want it like that maniacally, then it will be open to you.
Right.
Right. So, yeah. But yes, the answer is yes, because even if you do it a tiny bit, it will, 1 second will become 2, and 2 seconds will become 3. So, yes.
Yeah, I was even thinking, 10 minutes every hour is equal to...
Yes.
It's more than,
Yes. It's good.
120 minutes a day.
Yes, it's great.
120 minutes a day, which is 2 hours.
You should do that, 100%.
2 hours of self-inquiry, and it's tremendous.
Absolutely,
So another question I had was, sometimes the variation of this self-inquiry sort of present itself to me basically because of readings and also different sources, right? And one of them is, the awareness of being aware.
Yeah.
Right? So, so like your thoughts on that, if that's an equivalent practice to the who am I, and also the technique of japa, where you have a prolonged amount of silence between 2 instances of japa, right? That can go on endlessly. You can keep expanding the silence between the japa, and if you came out of the silence, then you repeat the japa again, and then you go back into silence again, right? And as you know, japa is a sort of a valid method for increasing inner silence. So how would you place either of these, awareness of awareness and using japa to sort of increase inner silence?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the japa method is more like along the lines of like a breathing type of technique. It will definitely quiet the mind, and that can be helpful because then that quiet mind can be examined more easily.
Would it be a portal though to the same thing as self-inquiry?
Not exactly
because of the silence.
No, it's not quite the same because the silence has to be examined. You see, many things can lead to a silent mind. Basically, concentration leads to a silent mind. So if you concentrate on anything,
Okay.
you can get into samadhi, right? Via any object of concentration. And then your mind will be silent for that moment. But that silence is insufficient. You have to then have something which then questions what that silence is, right? Because in some sense, right, the silent mind, it's sort of like presenting you with a mirror, like, oh, this is who you are, really. But then you have to have something which says, well, who am I, actually, effectively?
But if you
Silence is a lion, right? That time.
The silence is the mind is yeah, you can say it's like a lion, exactly. If you're absorbed in it, you could say it's like a lion, exactly.
It's like what?
Lion, like a rest, kind of a resting mind.
Srishti Sriti Laya.
Oh, lion. Okay.
If you get absorbed in that,
So
this
is the same as Turiya state. They say, after Om, even the Mandukya Upanishads, after Om, the silence is Turiya. Then go into Om again, there's a manifestation, then Turiya. So it's very similar. The japa concept is very similar to that.
I would prefer, the
Turiya,
it is similar. I mean, I would prefer to call Turiya something like, see, what happens is when you do the practice deeply of inquiry or surrender, or, whatever, if God favors you for some other reason, right, there is, I would call it like a special mode of mind. Special mode of mind where the ego seemingly seems to drop away, right?
Oh, that's
separation.
What is.
Yeah, that's what I would call Turiya, right? Where there's a seeming non-separation, right? You're awake, but unity experience. There's many different such experiences, right? Kind of could be ecstatic. It could
Transcendent.
It could be a transcendent kind of experience. Now, the point is that this is like, through that port, because I would say like there's a mental silence, and then through that you can sometimes get these transcendent-like experiences. Arguably, it's a kind of samadhi. Anyway, whatever it is, the point is that experience is not in itself exactly realization. It's still an experience, but it's a very special experience. And that special experience then becomes, it could be the portal to liberation. But usually what happens is one experiences something like that and one falls back. And then repeatedly does it, and then it becomes easier and easier. But anyway, So I, maybe it's on a continuum. It's very hard to say, but essentially, because there's seeming silence, then through that silence, examination of that silence, one can fall through the portal into the sort of wow kind of experience. That's not in itself liberation. That's just another, what I would call a glimpse, basically. So
and awareness of awareness.
Awareness. So this is a perfect time anyway to give some basic self-inquiry instructions. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and answer that question immediately. So the idea of awareness is problematic. Okay. Because what self-inquiry? So what is self-inquiry? Self-inquiry is the other practice, right? Self-inquiry is the other side of the coin of surrender. Really, it's the other practice that Ramana recommended, and of course also fundamental to the Vedanta tradition. Self-inquiry basically says this. You have self-inquiry. Self-inquiry, yeah. So self-inquiry basically says this. You currently have an ordinary, very taken for granted experience of your own existence right now. Like, I'm here, I'm alive, I'm viewing all of this, I'm listening to these words right now, right? And self-inquiry just asks this very, very small, silent, simple question that's really extremely, it's like a little virus, basically. Where is that knowledge coming from, is what it asks. What exactly is that? That experience you have of your own being right now. What exactly is that experience? Because what happens is that when we start to look for that, what immediately happens is that you and this can be posed in different ways. You can say who am I? Where am I? What am I? Right? But effectively, what you're looking for is not an abstract conception. You're not trying to think about it. It's you actually are experiencing it. Yeah, I know I'm here. What exactly is that? How do I know I'm here? What does that information consist of exactly, right? And so when you do that, when you look for yourself, right, what happens is that you immediately end up on something which is an object. How do you know it's an object? Because you're aware of it, exactly. So for example, right, very common, people will say, oh yeah, I feel like I'm in my head or something like that. I'm somewhere in my head, or maybe I'm here, something like, people give different answers. I'm in my body somewhere. But question you have to immediately ask is this something I'm aware of? And if the answer is yes, you can't be it. Now, how do you know that? Why is that the case? Because if you were it, there would be no distance between you and the thing. So you wouldn't be able to know it as a separate thing. So if you say, for example, I feel like I'm in my head, well, there's a feeling that's associated with that. You are aware of the feeling. If you were the feeling, you would not be able to be aware of it as a separate thing. So there's something else which is you, which is aware of it. Right? So what is the thing that's aware of it is the question. So that is still part of your experience. So you're trying to say, well, what is that experience then? You know, and you're trying to focus on that. And remember, what you're looking for is, it's not something far away. It's something which you are literally tasting, touching in some sense, like all the time, right? So it's like, for example, you have like a pole that's reaching out from you, wherever that is, to the world, right? And normally our attention is focused on the far side of the pole. And all this is saying is, okay, well, this far side of the pole is connected to a thought, to an emotion, to a perception. What's the near side of the pole connected to? It's connected to something. What's it connected to? So you want to look for what that's connected to. And then if you think you found it, you just conduct this simple operation of, am I aware of it? If I am, that I'm not it. So I must be something that's aware of that as well, and repeat. Does that make sense so far? Huh?
Is this the same, so the self-inquiry, is it what the Mundaka Upanishad talks about? I think in Mundaka Upanishad or Mandukya Upanishad, the one where it says, my eyes, the senses, right?
Yeah,
It examines the senses. The senses are operating, but
The
what is...
Yes.
Well, in the Upanishad,
it's there.
Upanishad.
What is aware? What is the eye of the eye?
The eye of the eye, the ear of the ear.
Yeah. Exactly. In a sense, it's exactly the same. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say, right, yes, I mean, probably is exactly the same thing.
I think her question is to be reframed as, how is Vedantic self-inquiry different from Ramana's
Exactly,
self-inquiry?
it's a good question.
That's what I would
Yeah,
think.
it's a very good question. So they're very complementary, but I would say they're a little bit different. Look, so the Vedantic self-inquiry is focused on kind of trying to, it's trying to show you conceptually, in some sense, what you aren't. Okay, what you are. It's pointing. It's not that it is pointing, because if you follow it very carefully, right? If you follow Vedantic inquiry very carefully, you will inevitably be forced to do Ramana's version of self-inquiry. Yes, because to understand what the Vedantic self-inquiry is ultimately saying, you will have to follow the layers of attention in exactly that order, and you will conclude by having to look for I. So you'll be in the same position ultimately. But the flavor is a little bit different.
Both of them help each other.
Yeah, they help each other.
So
Exactly.
I remember, I think in some place Ramana actually said, the Panchakosha meditation of the Vedantic side, he said, why do you want to bring in thoughts to think that you are the body and then not the body? Why don't you just wipe that out right away? Instead of imagining all that and then denying it.
Yes.
So,
I mean, that's certainly
kind of the subtle.
It's certainly easier if you can do that.
The thing is, like, you'll think, he has said it, that's how you think, but it's like to experience everything and on your own, so all those layers really help you come to that point.
I mean,
otherwise, Ramana said that, and I only get the knowledge.
Right.
I do not get the experience of feeling it and the statement in my own way.
Yeah, you need it in your own way. I think what this, see, the Panchakosha stuff and all that, I think what it is people have come in and do come in with many preconceptions, right?
Exactly.
So to give people some kind of framework, for giving them some kind of general picture, these things were said. But look, if you can do without them, then you're way better off, right? Your life is much easier. The less intellectual framework that you need, if you can go by faith. I mean, look, if you can go by faith completely, you don't even need inquiry. You just need surrender, right? That's sufficient, right? It's the same thing, really. So, but many people require a lot of intellectual explanation for
because the
various
faith
reasons.
is not there.
Because the faith is not there, exactly.
Because
That's right.
so many times been fooled by the world, so that is the memory we have.
Yeah.
So then to have the blind faith is getting harder and harder.
Exactly.
So,
It's grace, and your grace if you have that kind of
but
faith.
like if you follow through the memory is also appears, disappear kind of a thing. So then you know
it
that
may not
it's
be
a-
accurate. Yeah.
Right.
So
Memory also, that memory is there, that's why you act that way.
Yes.
But if you follow beyond memory, then, or you say that memory is also like appearance, disappearance. It's a temporary nature memory.
Yes.
So you do not rely on the memory also.
Yes.
Kind of a,
Yes.
Right?
Memories of of scriptures or anything like that. So
Not memory, our own memory.
Oh yeah, our own memory. Absolutely.
Our own
100%.
memory.
I was just gonna say, right? I mean, because yeah, Ramana himself mentions, right? He said I was lucky that I didn't fall into the trap of having to read all these scriptures, basically. But anyway, it's no, scriptures they're important for people at a certain stage, you know. But then they have to be given up in a sense. They have to be followed into the practice. That's what has to happen.
So I wanted to know, like, what is our goal, right? Actually, continuously in that transcendental mode, or go really above and then be in that glimpse mode, or
The
go
goal,
above
no. See, the goal is the goal is to get beyond anything called experience. So if there's something which has a beginning and an end, that's an experience. It doesn't matter if it's transcendental or
Yes,
not. You can call it however you like. It could be the Vishrupa Darshana. It doesn't matter what it is, right? It could be however transcendental you like. It still is an experience. So until there is a vanquishing of that, now what does that mean? You'll have to find out for yourself, right? No one can explain it to you exactly. But you have to go and pursue the inquiry until something beyond experience, something beyond experience, something which doesn't begin and doesn't end.
Yeah. So we could go up to that. I don't know. I'm struggling where. What else I should.
So look, I mean, I think we have to.
I don't know how to focus on concentrating. I don't know how to get the peace. Nothing of the sort. You continuously.
But who is experiencing the peace?
Yeah, that's okay.
See, your attention should be concentrated like a laser beam on trying to find. It's a hunt. See, it's a hunt. Self-inquiry is a hunt. Like, where am I? It's like a dog chasing its tail. Like, I see all the reflections, including peace, but where am I in this picture? Where am I in this picture? Where am I in this picture? So to be obsessed with that question, basically, right? And to keep hunting. The reason, and as you keep hunting, right, the attachments are being weakened in that process. And when they're sufficiently weak, they'll give way. So let's try some self-inquiry right now, and you can all experiment. So basically the idea is you have this basic sense of your own existence, of your own being, of your own awareness, and you're trying to locate it in some sense. Where are you? Where are you in this experience you're having? Where are you? So let's try that for 5 minutes and just see where your mind goes.
Came up to Vijnaname Kusha. Beyond that, I don't. I mean, this is new for me, so I fully aware of embodiment, fully aware of some pranic energy in my body. I'm fully aware of some thoughts, feelings, even impulses to some extent. Like, but that's it.
And
that's all I'm aware of.
Okay, and then so the one that's aware of all of those, right?
Yeah.
You get the sense? You do get the sense that
there is someone
aware
of
all that.
But that is still the ego, right? I'm still at the sort of the egoic level.
Well,
right?
I mean, you're looking essentially in a way. When you say the egoic level, what do you mean by that exactly?
Because I'm identified with the observer.
Well, of course, exactly. You're looking for the observer, essentially. How do you disidentify with the observer? You have to find the observer.
So that's the paradox, right?
Yeah.
It's the observer that is finding the actual observer.
That's exactly right. You're looking for it because.
But I see the observer as active person, that's the person that's taking the agency of action.
Of course, that's right. And that one is looking for themselves, basically. Where the observer is looking for the observer? Yes.
So how does the observer find the observer?
Well, the observer seems to have an experience of its own being.
Yeah.
Right? So what is that experience? How does the observer know that it exists is the question.
How does the observer know that?
How do you know that you exist? Basically, it's not like you look at this table and the table tells you you exist.
That's a self-evident part.
Well, what's the self-evident part?
Because I know
that
I
you
am.
exist. But that self-evident part is self-evident, nevertheless, by dint of some experience. You know, it's not an experience of an object. There's something which is giving you that self-evidence, basically.
Yeah, that's kind of where I hit the wall.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Like, that's the observer.
Because you're here, right? You're here as the subject to this. This is an object, I'm the subject, right? You're here as the subject to your experience. And you know that you're there in some sense, right? That we have the sense that we are like this, like whatever, deep inside there's some core thing that's me. I'm here, I'm like inside and I'm looking out at the world and I'm doing this stuff. That sense, find that thing which it seems which feels like it's there. I'm not saying it is there, but I'm saying it feels like it's there. That's what we're trying to hunt. Because you feel it. Because of course I'm here. I'm somehow inside and I'm seeing and doing all of these things. The thing that is experiencing all of that knows it's here, experiencing all of that.
So the self-inquiry is, who is this observer?
Yeah, you can say, who is this observer? Where basically it's some kind of it's an experience of a sort. It's a feeling of it. You can call it what you want. There's no word for it exactly because every word we use is going to be wrong. Feeling, an experience. It is some information or knowledge. It is the light that's being shed on, like the light by which all of this is being known.
But all of this is theory and words.
Yeah, I know.
So I try to put all that aside.
It's in your own experience. You are personally experiencing what you call a self-evident fact. That self-evident fact, what does it consist of? Like it's there in your experience somehow.
Right.
So that part of your experience, the part of your experience that is not the specific objects, well, that part is obviously the subject, whatever that is.
Right. So the subject for me, like what I identified with the subject, that subject is just simply the observer of all these other things.
Okay, well you can call it that, but where is it? What is it? What is that observer?
And who is the observer?
Yeah, who is the observer? What you call it what you like. Like, see, calling an observer is just a word. The point is you have a...
That is experience. That I experienced, so like you were saying, if I say I observe my body, I'm aware of my body, then I'm not the body.
Correct.
Right? So like that, if you do that...
But there's two pieces there, right? There's I and the body.
Yeah.
Right? So the body part is fairly it's clear what that is. Like that's this piece of information, this whatever, you can call it your hand or whatever it is, right? Whatever part of the body it may be. But the I that experiences it is also known. How is that part known? You know, we can kind of draw circles around all the sensory information we have, like, oh, this is a sound, it's this kind of thing, right? You know, this is a sight, this is even a thought or an emotion. But what is the I part is the question. I have this thought. Okay, the thought, okay, that's clear. It's a set of words. Like, oh yeah, I have this to do tomorrow. That's a thought. But what's the I part of it? I experience the thought. What is the I referring to there? You're saying it's the observer, that's just another word. So
that's the self-evident part.
Well, but it's
there is just some me that is observing the
thought.
thought.
But you have to, it's self-evident, meaning that it's evident that it is there because of something. That is to say, I feel that it's self-evident. You see what I'm saying? Like it's not self-evident because it's not like 2 + 2 = 4. It's not logical self-evidence. It's experientially self-evident.
Yeah.
So that part of your experience that is self-evident in that way, you're trying to say, well, What is giving me this sense that this is so self-evident? Something is giving you that sense. So what is that? What is that exactly? Exactly. Well, it's fine not to know. It's fine not to know. But the point is to know that you are, yeah, it is self-evident. That's good. It's good that you feel that. That self-evidence is rooted in something. What is self-evident exactly? What exactly is it that is so self-evident? Something. It's not the table, it's something else. It's what experiences the table. What is that which is self-evident there? It's something which I'm experiencing as my self-awareness, as me, as separate from the table, as the observer of the table. But that piece, what exactly is that in my own experience? Like, I'm here, where? Like, where am I seated, so to say? It's not the body exactly, but the body is something of which I'm aware. So where am I seated is the question. Does that make sense?
The question makes sense.
Yeah.
I have no answer.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, it's good.
I don't even know how to get
Of
there.
course.
Well, I think I know my question. I don't know if it's a new question or the one that I've forgotten earlier. Doesn't matter.
Either way.
I think there are two questions, two parts, maybe the same question. One is, it's sort of this discussion, and my thought was also reminded me of the words, this I am unknowable. It's just that self-inquiry really is to, I just can't get to it. Because all I can do is use my mind and my thoughts, and and it's beyond that. Okay.
Yes.
So yes. So, but then you also said, when the desire to have that experience becomes so strong, as strong as the dying person's wish to.
Yes.
I don't have such a strong desire.
Well, it'll come if you practice, yeah.
So the question there is, but in the sense, I'm enjoying this journey, and I'm enjoying the Leela of Bhagwan, as they call it. Am I something, do we feel guilty about not having a strong desire?
Well, I mean, it's not exactly guilty. It's see, it's tricky. It's to your own benefit to pursue this, is the truth, right? I mean, I could, some scriptures bash you over the head with it more than others, right? I mean, like, if you look at Viveka Chudamani, which Maharishi also translated, of course, it says at the beginning, right, like, he has this kind of like admonishment at the beginning, right? It's so difficult, extremely difficult to obtain a human birth, unbelievably difficult. And then so difficult once you obtain a human birth to become an educated person. And then even more difficult once you become an educated person to even come into contact with the spiritual, and then even more difficult to find, a teacher and all of these things. Once you have all of these criteria, if you don't pursue the spiritual, you're as good as killing yourself. So,
No, my question is, I'm pursuing the spiritual, that's what
I'm Sure.
But, if it doesn't happen tomorrow, I'm fine.
Well, I mean, the burning desire comes from as you do the practice. There's no room for the burning desire because there's too many attachments, right? When the attachments lessen, it's like the desire for liberation feeds on that, basically, and it becomes stronger and stronger. You can't make yourself, truth is, you cannot really force yourself into having a desire you don't have. So whatever desire you have, follow that, basically. And, whatever level of spiritual desire you have, you can't, there's nothing more that you can do.
Suddenly it'll come.
It'll come.
It's over the years of practice.
Over the years.
Yes, of practice, suddenly things are, you don't even have to put in any effort.
Yes.
That's just a status.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
But I think you have to practice detachment from things which are worldly in sense, right? Because we might have so many bad habits, like watching TV, watching movie, waste our time.
So, I will just say, right, I mean, so yeah, sure, I mean, you can try to detach yourself from those things, although, my general, I mean, it's a complicated topic, because truth be told, in the practice per se, okay, it's not about whether you watch TV or don't watch TV or whatever it is. It's where your mind is, okay? So if you are surrendering or doing self-inquiry, if that's where your attention is, it doesn't matter what the mind and body are doing. They can be watching TV or whatever else they want to do. It's not TV per se that's the problem, it's where the attention is. And I'm always hesitant to recommend, like, well, I mean, you can experiment, everyone's different, right? But, the old style of scriptures was very much about, forcibly separate yourself from all objects of
yamas
desire.
and niyamas, right? Yamas
Yes,
and niyamas
exactly.
of Patanjali.
Yeah. So forcibly separate yourself from all possible pleasurable objects and all of that. I mean, I don't necessarily think that's the. I feel like I prefer a more subtle approach, but everyone's different. Some people that works. But the point is, I think the real point is that when you, the reality is that when you do focus on inquiry or surrender so intensely, it doesn't really matter if you're watching TV or not, because that's not what you're really focused on. It fades into the background.
But doesn't that contradict what you said earlier, that the purification of the mind, right?
Yes.
Like that assists in the
It does.
surrender inquiry practice.
It does.
So there is also in Bhagavad Gita, there is also the ladder of fall, right?
Yeah.
Where you can get carried away by all these distractions and attachments.
So my notion of purification is slightly different, because I do subscribe to purification, but the way I would see it, this is like I recommend therapy and things like that, is because the way I see it is if you are suffering from various kinds of, let's say, addictions to certain things, it's because there are needs of yours that you're not fulfilling in a more healthy way, right? So you need to attend to those needs. It's not about being moralistic and being like, oh, I shouldn't do that, that's bad, like beat yourself up. It's not helpful. You just end up in a cycle of rebellion and back and forth and back and forth.
So you have conflicting parts.
You'll have conflicting parts,
yeah.
exactly. So you need to examine yourself, right, with the help of a therapist, or maybe not, whatever you can, right? The point is, you need to examine yourself and see what is going wrong here. Why am I resorting to this? Because something else is not happening correctly, right? I need to fix that other piece. Why is it do I keep wanting eating cookies every day? It's because I'm not getting enough of this other vitamin or whatever it is, right? I'm not getting. Something else is wrong in my life, basically. So that's how I would view it. There's some needs that are being unfulfilled, fulfill those needs, and then this will correct itself better.
And what if it's not possible to fulfill those needs?
Well, if it's not possible to fulfill those needs, then you'll have to do without and suffer. It's. I mean, you may have another Gemma. I mean, I would question. Actually, though, the truth is, I think I would question whether that's really the case. Everyone has different situations, and it becomes more complicated. But many times, what we think our needs are may not be our needs. Maybe we're confounded about. It's not. This is again why the psychological becomes so complicated, right? The reality is, unfortunately, people do have tons of psychological baggage. They really do, from their upbringing, from the past. They're just carrying it with them, and it's shaped their whole character. And and it's not a simple thing to deal with often. But it's a lot of where the ball game is unfortunately there. That's the truth.
So, but if we land in, like you were saying, like in Vivek Chudamani, this is such a rare, extremely rare opportunity to land in that place, to have company of gurus, to have this kind of sangha. So then whatever we interpret as, oh, I need this or I need that, like you're saying, I think it's good to question it, because the practice, as the need for the practice or the mumukshutvam can override those needs, right?
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. But 100%. But what happens is when those needs are unfulfilled, it interferes usually, especially if it interferes with the motivation to do the practice.
Okay.
That's how you'll see it, right? So that's the telltale sign of psychological stuff is, I just don't feel like doing the practice. I don't know why. I don't exactly know why, right? That means something's going on under the hood in your mind that is stopping you, and you have to troubleshoot that,
Yeah.
But more than, for me, Akilesh, more than not wanting to do the thing, for me, it's things like you get carried away by
exactly,
right? That's where it is.
Yeah.
Like even when you start off with surrender, and like you said, right, when you're cooking, you start off with surrender, and then the faith is where what is missing, right? What if I'm doing this, will I end up doing the right thing?
Right. Yes.
And you go as far and you say, forget it.
Yeah,
I need to do this. So
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
like you start off with the right intention and then you get carried away.
That's exactly right.
Not just cooking, right? Everything. When you're doing something, you start off and then you get carried away. And also, like you said, right? Giving the karma yoga.
Yes.
The karma yoga part, it's easier
Yeah.
when things don't go well.
Yeah, afterwards, I don't care.
I'm not very agency in this.
Yes.
It's easier.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
when everything
Yes.
goes well,
Yeah.
is where that karma yoga thing is very hard.
Yeah, you're right.
Even
You're
though you're
right.
mouthing the thing, saying, I never did this, it's all thing, but there is that still that like attachment.
I know.
Attachment is there.
I know.
You say,
All you can do is notice it. All you can do is notice it.
Maybe I actually contributed to it, when you didn't contribute to it. So it is a challenge.
As long as you can try, that's all you can do, right? You can try, and you're right. There's going to be some inevitable feelings that will come up. But if you can have a sense of humor about it, and just keep that attitude in mind, that will itself help you, you know. But generally speaking, it is very true, right? Like we talk about, good things happening. Pleasures are much more insidious attachment than suffering is.
Yeah.
That's the truth, right?
The pleasure causes more pain than pain.
Because it's very hard to detach yourself from it.
Attachments.
There's a great story, about I like the story. There's a great story about the Buddha where where supposedly Indra hears about the Buddha teaching on earth, okay? And Indra is like, I heard about this great rishi, I want to go see him and hear what he has to say. So he goes to earth and goes to the Buddha and he says, teach me how to attain moksha. And the Buddha gives him a bunch of tips, okay? And then he goes back, okay? And then one of the Buddha's disciples, I forget who it is, but I don't know which scripture this is, but anyway, he's like, I wonder what happened to Indra, what happened to him? So he goes to Indraloka and he talks to Indra and he says, what happened? Did you put into practice all the stuff he told you? And he said, the moment I stepped back into Indraloka, I forgot it all. Like instantly upon stepping into Indraloka, because Indraloka is like the citadel of pleasure. Right? So it's so beautiful, right? So the moment you step foot in there, it's all gone. So hard to keep in mind this stuff, right?
Yeah. So I have a question about experiencing the observer. So. So I know that I'm chasing the witness, the person who observes all these things.
Yes.
Yeah? So series of questions will lead you to experience observer, or it like you do some kind of constant practice or some kind of intensity, intense focus of the observer through series of questions will lead you to experience observer, not saying that this observer, I am the observer.
So your question is, will questions help you get there?
How can I experience I want to experience the observer in my own experience.
Yes. Well,
that's what I want. I do not want, again, asking questions are not only the method.
Yeah, questions are only
like, who is the observer? I am seeing this, I am this.
Yeah, that's not
it. Just a question. But I want to experience it in my own way of the observer who is witnessing it.
Yes. Well, so then that's the right intent. So, you're quite correct that the questions are not themselves the point. The questions are pointers to help you look within. The point is that you're experiencing the observer somehow right now. That's the ground level fact.
Yeah, that's what
So right now, you are experiencing the observer. That's how you know you exist. You know you exist right now. The question is, what does that knowledge consist of? Like it's as if you're, you're listening to some music right now, okay? And I don't know. There's a very, very soft instrument, that's there in the background of the music, right? Like, what is that instrument? I want to hear it more clearly. It's there, but there's all these other instruments that are playing at the same time. So you have to mentally try to tune out all the other instruments and just focus on this very background instrument. You can barely hear it, right? You focus, what is that? I know it's there, It's there. And you're focusing on that. It's there, it's right in the music, So similarly, right, like it's you are experiencing your own observership, right? Because that's what is enabling you to see all of this, obviously, right? Like, if there weren't space you know, there would not be, there wouldn't be objects, is another way of looking at it, right? Like, there has to be space which contains the objects. You know, time is also a kind of container. The light of the observer is also a kind of container, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You are currently experiencing your own observer status.
Yeah.
The question is, what does that experience, you know, you're experiencing all this other stuff at the same time. Can you essentially shunt away all the particular objects so you can see whatever is remaining, essentially, you know? That's what you're trying to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So like, in other words, I should really increase my intensity to filter out that particular thing from...
Yes. You should increase your intensity to say, how do I know I am? Basically, I mean, you don't have to use that question. The question is pointing to the fact that you have this experience.
Yes.
It's as if you were touching something right now. You're touching something, and I said, describe the texture of this thing that you're touching, right? But, you know, again, it may be something very, very, it may be like you're touching 100 other things at the same time. I want you to, you know, you're touching a bunch of things, and I'm saying focus on this one thing that you're touching, you know? Or something like, it is a little bit like, if I asked you, you know, these are all similar parallel questions, you know, like, yeah, what is the experience of time? What is the experience of time? Like by itself, time itself. Not any events in time, but time itself. What is time itself? You experience it somehow, but what exactly is it? It's almost exactly like self-inquiry because you have to go almost to the same place.
Yeah, that's what Rama's philosophy. He says, thus spake Rama, that is only time. You look far away, then you know that there is no time.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And you have to act as if so many years down the road, how you would deal with this problem.
Oh, that's
that problem, huh?
Yeah, well, that's a separate issue, which is looking back, right?
No, not looking back. Say, for example, 10 years down the road, what looks very serious to me now, 10 years down the road, it may
not be very serious.
It's not at all serious for me. So currently, when you are dealing with the situation, you project this to 10 years down the road, how I would behave.
Right.
This is very silly, I would say.
Yes.
So that's the way you have to behave now.
Correct. No, but what I'm talking about, when I'm talking about time is a little bit. No, that's true. That's very good advice.
This is it. It's a hack.
It's a hack. It's a hack for. That's a hack for.
Self-help techniques.
It's a self-help technique for dealing with life situations. Or
it's not dealing with the life situation. Each one core message will be given by each person. Vivekananda, likewise Rama, thus spake Rama. Just one small booklet, which is what is the core name, what is the essence of his teaching, what's the essence of Rama's philosophy. And he said, thus spake Rama, time.
But what I
go beyond time.
But what I mean by time, but questioning time is a little bit different. So, for example, right, you know, it's like one of these things. If I ask you, you know, what is the present moment, right? Every time you look at something, it's going to be just past, for example, right? Or if you examine time, it's always going to be a duration, right?
Yeah.
What is within that duration, right? What is the exact present moment? It's very hard to locate that.
Yeah.
It's a very similar idea. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
You know, so
melting.
It keeps splitting further and further and further.
Current becomes future, and then the melting point.
What is the exact now is the question, right? The exact now. That's very hard to find because the exact now is instantaneously gone. You know, it's never. It's always past. When you examine something, it's always the past. It's always the past. Where is now?
There is no present.
Well, right, exactly. You can say there's no present. You can say it's a way of, yes, in a sense it's true. But the point is, so that's similar. You're experiencing this thing called the now, somehow, it seems to be, and yet when you actually look for it, all you see is the past, or maybe thoughts of the future. But the point is you don't see the now. Whenever you're looking for it, it's already something which is somehow evading you, even though you're continuously experiencing it. So that's the paradox. So similarly, you know, we are continuously experiencing I, but when we look for I, all we see are objects, meaning things that have beginnings and ends, things that are limited in some sense.
Yeah.
where is me in all of this? All I see are the things that I experience. I'm looking for me. All I see are the things that I experience. Where is the experiencer? I know I'm here because it's self-evident. It's self-evident that when I'm experiencing, that there is the objects of experience and there's something else, which is me, which is the one experiencing this stuff.
Isn't the same thing like I need a mirror to look myself, right?
Well, right. Well, in a sense, yes. You're looking for what is, well, you may be the mirror, kind of, is really what's going on, you know? You may be a mirror. It's very mysterious, right? It's very, it's maddening. It's a maddening puzzle, really, is what it is. Because if you really think about it very carefully, it becomes very, very, very hard to even understand what's even happening. Really, this is why it's Maya, right? You really look deeply, it becomes unbelievably puzzling. Because how can it be that I'm literally living this and I have no idea what it is? It's like crazy.
It's a mystery,
you know?
right?
It's a total mystery. Well, it's a total mystery, but at the same time it can be penetrated in some sense, which is so weird. It is, you know, because what we think we are is not what it seems to be. That's what it is.
You know? My question is, will the analogy help, or series of questioning will help?
What'll help is
our series of experiencing
continuous intense searching.
Root experience, like travel, navigate through the experiences. So
no. Well, the continuous hunt, the continuous intense search for where am I? Who am I? I mean, you don't need the question. It's not about the questions. I'm limited to that because if I speak, it's going to be in words.
Yeah.
I can't help it. But the point is, it is an inner looking for the one who looks. The searcher is searching for the one who searches. The observer is looking for the one who observes. It's not external looking. It's an internal looking. The observer knows that the observer exists. That's what self-awareness is. The one who is aware that they are aware is looking for the one who is aware that they are aware.
Yeah.
It's a recursive problem.
Yeah, it's a recursive. Huh?
So is it possible that we can even experience that awareness, because like the one who is aware that is aware?
Yes.
Because now it's beyond senses, beyond mind, beyond memory, beyond everything.
That's right.
So now how are we going to get the signal?
Yeah.
That.
Well, it's a very good question, right? So here is I mean, there's multiple things to be said. One is, you are somehow experiencing your own existence, strangely enough, right? So you're right, and from a logical level, that that it shouldn't be the case, but in fact we seem to be. So whatever it is that we seem to be experiencing, we have to hunt that down. Really, the truth is, right, what we're looking for is not the capital S self. What we're looking for is the ego. We're looking for the ego, because that's what we feel ourselves to be. So we're looking for the ego. It turns out when you look for the ego in this fashion, right, and you go through all the layers of object with which the ego is identified, right, like someone wearing like 1,000 masks, you know, and you strip away the masks, at the end of that process, what seemed to have been a solid decision-making, experiencing, suffering, core entity turns out not to be that at all. The ego then turns out to be the self in a separate way, right? What gives it the egoic sense are the masks. Strip away the masks and the ego reveals itself to be the true self in an odd way. Now, you can ask questions. What exactly discovers this? I mean, you can ask these questions. What exactly discovers that? Who discovers that? How is that discovered? You know, and those are legitimate questions. And I can only say, right, that essentially the mind goes to its own limit. Right, the mind goes to its own limit, and it's like it experiences. It does experience its own
depth.
And you can say death if you want, but its experiences in a sense, really, what's ironic is, right, what's really being experienced is the illusion, right? It's the illusion. What is the source of Maya, really? Once that is seen, then the self, then the illusion can't stand anymore, you know? If you look where the magician doesn't want you to look, then the trick doesn't work anymore. So it's not the self that can be seen directly. It's really the illusion that can be seen. But by whom is it seen? I mean, it's really the illusion. I mean, what you can't really say what's happening exactly is the truth. But you know, it's some, you can call it, if you want, you can call it some structural change in the mind. Though the structural change in the mind will lead to the recognition that there was no such change because there's no such thing as ignorance to begin with. So the whole thing is fiction. This is all happening at a fictional level. There's only fictional things happening. It's a hypothetical level, a virtual level, you know? It seems to be, for example, this is language, concepts, all of these are in this, you know? They're all based on, language concepts are all based on the sense of there's a solid I in here against a world out there. That is the basis for thinking, okay? The basis for all language, all concepts, all thinking. It's all based on that division. If, through the process of inquiry, you hunt down and you see that division is not true, actually, it's not true, then the entire conceptual house of cards, which is built on that structure, can't survive. And you cannot even have the language to say what the actual truth is. Because language, you know, the truth is spoken then, right? It's spoken in a language which is meaningless. So, you know, it appears, for example, right, I'm saying words that seem to have meaning, and you seem to be listening and appear to be understanding, right? But the reality is none of these things are actually happening in the way that they seem to be. None of these things are actually happening the way they seem to be.
So I thought of an analogy. So if you see you're driving in the desert and you see a mirage far away, and you are trying to analyze, okay, how deep is the water? Like it looks like a body of water.
Yeah.
You're trying to see how vast is the water, how deep is the water, and you're aware of the water. But as you drive closer and closer, it starts disappearing. Right?
Yes. Yes.
You basically come to the realization that there's only you.
Yeah.
In the desert, there's no water, there's nothing.
Yes, exactly, right? Exactly. By examining the illusion very closely, the illusion in some sense disappears. It can't, what happens is though, you know, it can't be said to even disappear because
it was never there.
The ideas of appearance and disappearance, ignorance and liberation are all built on the illusion. Right. So the illusion destroys the ways of talking, basically. It destroys the ways of thinking, in some sense. That's why it can't be said that there was ever ignorance. That's why it's also said in the Upanishads, right? The true self, it's beyond being and non-being, both, right? Because why? Because being and non-being are thoughts, essentially. They're thoughts. The true being cannot be limited by thought in that way. The true awareness is not our limited notion of awareness, you know? Our notions are all limited, basically, you know? So, you know, yeah, it's Satchidananda, it's true. But at the same time, it's also more deeper, you can say, it's nothing. It cannot be described by adjectives, right? It can't even be described as nothing, you know? It can't even be described as that. So the point is, it's pointing to a conceptual difficulty, right? What's really happening at the end, really, it can't be spoken about, you know? But the important thing is for the seeker, you can think of it as there is something at the end of the rainbow, you know, and it is worth pursuing. Yes.
When you get there, is it the end?
What is it?
Well, exactly. The end doesn't make any sense at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
If you get to the end, ends and beginnings don't make any sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's how they said the age.
So who has duties?
Duty, I mean, it's a conception based on society's needs, essentially, right? I mean, you know, from the spiritual seeker's viewpoint, the only real duty is to the spirit, you know? It's to discover your true nature. And what helps that is your duty and nothing else. So.
And yet the seeking cannot effectively happen unless we take care of those other so-called societal duties.
But that's
Right?
what he
That's
said
still
in
a
the
construct.
all these
That's
times.
still a construct, is that what you're saying?
I mean, the society's needs are definitely a construct, but I mean, it need not be the case that you have to, fulfill all those other things. I mean, that's questionable, I would say.
That morning coffee which
So-
you're trying to do.
If you avoid the duties and you find yourself unable to progress in the spiritual path, does that mean then that you are, because I'm thinking
Yeah.
about bypass, like a spiritual bypass where you are using this, you're actually using this to avoid something.
Yeah, that's not so much. That's not societal duties. What you're talking about is psychological stuff, right?
Okay.
So people have their own psychological baggage, and they want to leap over that, not deal with it, and just somehow spiritual it away, and usually doesn't work.
But part of that is
Yeah.
also avoiding duties, right? Like when you have those psychological baggages, then you don't.
I wouldn't call it about duties. I would call it like not being honest about what you really want.
Okay.
Not being honest about your emotions, not being honest about your desires. That is a serious problem.
So this whole thing about kartavya and all that, like the scriptures where they say the
Dharma
like
and
dharma
kartavya.
and kartavya, like where you have to fulfill your duties and you, like you can't
That's for
avoid
people.
them.
I mean, that's for people who are basically, not quite yet on the spiritual path. I mean, it'll prepare you, right? If you do your duties in that way.
The dharma is
right.
again, it's another like time
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
mean,
there's
we are saying we have to go beyond time. Dharma is again a concept again for us to live in the society.
Yeah, that's right.
I think personal responsibility you have to fulfill. If you have
As
dependence.
long as you are
have
the
to fulfill.
grihastha or the thing.
Well, it all very much depends, right? So I mean, if you commit yourself to surrender inquiry, then and if you're really deeply committed to it, then whatever happens happens, basically. Whether it helps your dependence or not. It's
Having that
Like a lot of
trusted
people-
faith is hard.
it is.
A lot of people accuse Buddha that he abandoned his duties,
Sure.
right? And went off to meditate.
Yes.
I mean, all the
Right?
Tirthankars, Jain Tirthankars,
they
they
all
also
like
just
Yes, of course.
abandoned their
Yes,
white
exactly.
or whatever. But what you're saying is you're reframing it, saying that if their pursuit
That's
is
different. That's
true,
that's
the
convert.
only duty
That's
then
what you have
of
to do.
human birth is liberation.
Yes.
So-
If you are, yes, 100%, absolutely.
So that their path is true. In Buddha's case, it was true.
Yes.
He took it to its culmination.
That's right.
basically.
Yes.
So but then when at that point the duty becomes irrelevant for
Correct.
him.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But there are people like I guess for us, I mean for me at least, like I can't just abandon.
No. Look, see, it's
You know.
so. I mean, again, it's all about. I fully agree. Look, everyone has to do what they are. They have to work in. Truth is, they have to work in correspondence with what their actual desire is, right? So one cannot can't lie to yourself and say, I have the desire to do self-inquiry, every waking moment when you don't yet have it. You might want to have it someday, right? So we have to be honest, and that's why I suggested, right? You do what you can, right? Obviously, right? You do what you can. That is clearly the case. And if you feel like, for example, it's too scary to do inquiry or surrender, then certainly you can do karma yoga during the rest of the time. You can do other things as much as you can. But we shouldn't completely deceive. The truth is, it's not about duty; it's about desire. So my desire, the actual way to put it is, I am not at this point ready to take the full path yet, which is most people, of course, right? I can do 10% or 20%, which is great. It's better than 0%, okay? And to be honest, your desire will build over time. Even with that 10% or 20%, you will increase your desire for the spiritual over time. But it's not really about duty. It's about what you actually want. And people aren't ready yet to make that kind of commitment. They aren't. Most people aren't. So, but by doing the practice, any amount, you will increase your desire to do that. But I will just say, right? I mean, on this point, because it's such a beautiful and relevant quote. If you look at Shankara, his Upadesha Sahasri, he gives an example there. He says, what is it? Like he says it in some footnote or something. He says, duty is a huge binding factor for a lot of people. It just is a trap, basically.
Yes, it is a trap.
It's a trap, and he says it's like someone who refuses the spiritual path because of so-called duties. He likens that person to someone who, I forget, it's a woman, I think, who Indra offers her amridam, but she thinks of it as urine because of her notion of duties, basically. She refuses it, basically. So, immortality is refused because of false notions of duties. So just be careful. And I think, Ramakrishna, if I'm not mistaken, he was very severe about it. Of course, very wonderful person, but he said something like, for example, if your spouse, I think he said that to one of his disciples, like, if your spouse is blocking your spiritual progress, like, get rid of them. Something like this. Like, he was like very like firm about it, He was like so harsh, right?
Right,
like
he said it to his core group.
Core group. I can't necessarily say that for everybody, but I'm just pointing out, right? Jesus said in the Bible, he says, these similar kinds of ideas. He said, if your right arm offends thee, cut it off. Because better that your right arm be cut off than that your whole body be cast into hell. These are all very dramatic ways of putting it, but again, same thing. Jesus says in the Bible. I always like this quote. The story. Someone was a follower of his and said, I feel like I'm doing a lot, but I want to be perfect. What else do I have to do? And Jesus says, well, okay, abandon all your possessions and follow me. And he says, okay, I will, but he says, my father just died, and I want to go back and I want to do the funeral rites for him, right? And Jesus says, nobody who turns their back on the kingdom of heaven for something as trivial as someone's death, is worthy of the spiritual life.
There's a story, actually, my dad used to say that there's this guy who has a big fight with his wife, and then he decides he's going to become a sannyasi. So he goes and takes sannyas, and then he comes to tell his family he's wearing the orange robe and shaved his head and everything. And he tells his family, okay, I'm taking sannyas, I'm fed up of all you guys, I'm going to go to the ashram and live a peaceful life. And then he comes out to the gate and he sees like a big pot there. He calls his son, hey, take this and put it inside somebody will steal the pot. Things like that. This guy really was worthy of taking sannyas.
Yes, exactly. The point is, it's not duty, right? We should just be honest. It's their desire, right? It's our own psychological hang-ups. And it's not wrong. We all have them, right? So, it's not something you can just snap your fingers and wish away. You can't. You just have to work with wherever you are and work towards, as much honesty as you can have in terms of what your desires are. But let's not deceive ourselves by saying, oh, society requires it of me, therefore. No, it's really, we are unwilling to make the step yet, that's all.
I think that's very true, because we keep thinking, right, oh, I have to support my child. A child is 10, you support, 18 you support, 21 you support, 30 you support.
It never ends.
Do you really have duty towards them?
Exactly.
Not really.
No.
But then, we just say, oh, I have a duty, so I'm not able to do it.
Yes.
So you're right, it's like, it's how much desire do you have for this that you're willing to let go of all these things.
Yes.
And you really have to examine it yourself and be honest with the answer.
Yes.
And like you said, it may be only 20%
That's
now,
okay,
but eventually it'll get to more.
Yes.
Hopefully
you
get to
have
100%, but you have to be really honest. That is the truth.
But if you have guilt, that's a sign, right? That
if you have guilt, that's a sign
you haven't
that
fully detached.
Yeah, you haven't dealt with all your psychological habits, is what it's a sign of. Basically.
Like the attachments, right? That there is an attachment. So if you forcibly try to say that, okay, I'm not going to engage with that, and then you feel guilty.
Correct.
Then there is something going on.
I don't recommend forcing yourself into anything like that. I recommend if there's a conflict like that, then you have to examine it. Like, what's going on inside me? It's like a bunch of like warring parties inside you, right? So you don't want one side to just crush the other. You want to see if you can come up with something which will suit everyone better, basically. So you have to engage in that process.
On this only, I had a question long back when we were doing the surrender technique. So you are trying to surrender all what your emotions, thoughts, and actions you have been doing and getting off. But you have some actions in life, like action of getting good in life, health-wise, career-wise, family-wise, everything. So now, how do you get the drive and motivation to do that? Because one side you are trying to do surrender all the time. You are practicing.
Well,
so that motivation is going away, which you need to do the action.
Well, I mean, the real truth is, right, that, again, the basic theory behind all of this in the first place, it's not just theory, but it's the truth, right, is you're not really in control of what's going to happen. You're not really in control of what you're going to do. What you're going to do is what you're going to do, whether it be good or whether it be bad. So, if you can accept that fact, right, because the truth is the idea that you're dictating what happens is an illusion. So, if you can accept that fact, then it doesn't really matter what the move towards surrender is not going to change anything. It seems like it's going to change something because of the illusion that's at work. But aside from that, right, the deeper point anyway, even if you want to believe you have some control, is you don't know who you are. That's really what it all comes down to, right? See, there's a huge I can't even stress this enough, right? The core thing around which our entire life revolves, right, is I. And we don't know what that I is. So why are you concerned about your career or your health or anything? Because it connects to so-called I, but you don't even know what that is. If you can really absorb the fact that you don't know who you are, then all the other things lose their importance. Like, why would I care about what I'm going to be in 20 years or what my kid is what's going to happen to my kid? I literally don't know who I am. Does that make sense?
But
it's not a figurative thing.
Yeah, it makes sense. But let's just forget about the future also. But for living in present, how do you have that action?
Well,
you don't do.
You give up. You give up. If you're doing surrender, that's literally in the word, right? You give up whether the action happens or not. The actions are perfectly capable of happening. Let me assure you, right? If you surrender, it is entirely possible that you will do all the things you need to do for your health and career and stuff like that. But it's possible you may not do those things. So surrender says, I am giving up my so-called control that I don't actually have anyway. My so-called control over what happens. And why? Why would you do this? Because you are trying to attain something which is beyond time and space, which is perfect, which is not subject to death and illness and loss, right? Which is true.
So in essence, you are detaching yourself from the results.
Yeah, of course you are. Yes, you are.
Once you are not attached to the results, then you are not attached to, like, you will do the action, you don't care.
Absolutely.
And you keep on doing the
right,
path
absolutely.
of surrender.
Because all these things are a thought, right? The idea of results
You're
are
not even doing the actions. The actions are happening.
They're happening anyway. That is the what they're trying to say.
So, like, what is the difference between, like, action, like person taking proactive action versus a lazy person who is thinking he wants to take action, or maybe I don't want to take the action. So
that is again the personality.
I mean, there's a lot of ways to answer the question. You can say it's their, you can say it's their personality or character. You can say it's a lot of things. But from the standpoint of surrender, it doesn't really matter. The standpoint of surrender, maybe the lazy person will be lazy, maybe the active person will be active. But whoever does surrender will gain the benefits of that, regardless. You don't have to judge what the outer mind and body do. They are functioning according to their own laws, basically.
That
that's happening whether you surrender or not.
That's happening whether you surrender or not. Absolutely, 100%.
You don't have to necessarily surrender. Whether you surrender or not, whatever is happening is happening.
Basically, surrender is simply acknowledging the truth, which is I am not in control.
I'm not in control.
Otherwise, you're simply
right now, Gaurav, a series of things are happening that are making you go to the gym and doing that. You are taking the credit for it, just that you will not take credit for it anymore.
That it is happening.
So that's how.
How thin the line is between giving up and.
Actually, you are not giving up.
You're not giving up either.
How do you get motivated that you're going to the gym, or you're just lying
Let it be whatever it is. Let it be whatever it is.
It's a Whether you feel like going to the gym that day or not is like, if it happens, it happens.
That is, yeah.
It's
a fine line.
making the choice.
You may be very surprised at what you're motivated to do if you surrender. You know, we think we have to whip ourselves into action.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
that's not true.
Yes, I always feel that way. Like I have to get going, and I'm so many times I just don't want to do anything.
Now they know.
They don't want to, right? Yes, exactly. If you try to like make yourself do stuff,
Yes.
you don't want to do it,
Yes.
right? Yes. And if you relax, sometimes you do want to do it, right? That's how it works.
All of us like you, right? Everybody is speaking it to make you understand.
We don't understand it.
Hey guys, sorry.
One conversation.
Let's have one quick conversation. Go ahead.
So I think earlier you said there's no willpower.
There's no what now?
There's no willpower.
Correct, that's right.
But it feels like you need a little bit of willpower to accept that there's no willpower.
Well, what I'm suggesting is that you know, I mean, the ultimate truth may very well be that you have zero free will. Exactly, correct. Whatever feels like your willpower should ideally be deployed towards keeping your mind one-pointedly on surrender inquiry. That's the ideal situation, basically. Or if you can't, barring that, then whatever you can do on the spiritual scale, you know, whatever that may be, whatever, even the smallest thing. But you're right. I mean, there's a little bit of a paradox. You know, it's true. I said, you know, there's no free will. So, and yet I'm telling you to do this. So, you know, that the truth is, I can only explain that by saying that. Okay, well, I can explain it a couple ways. One I can say is, look, you feel as if you have free will, okay, or you feel as if you have some control over your will anyway. Whatever that is, whatever you call it, free or not. Whatever that feeling of will is, direct it in this fashion. Yeah. So, and also, like I said before, right? Ultimately, right? The reality is surrender and inquiry are nature. What do I mean? What do I mean by that? What I mean is, you see, the self. The self is beyond. The true self is beyond all objects. True self is beyond all objects. So one way you can view what it's doing is, it is continuously, in some sense, ignoring all objects. Serenely, right? Effortlessly. It is ignoring all particularities. What is that? That's surrender. No will. It is effortlessly, serenely just being. Right? Similarly, right? If you look at inquiry, what inquiry's hunting eye, right, which is an infinite kind of movement inward, you might say, right? And that infinite movement inward, that's also the self. Yeah. The continuous, that continuous motionless motion is also viewed as the self. So that's our true nature, right? We are pretending to do this action that we actually are, you know? Like I'm going to do this thing called like being. It's as if I was saying, I want you to be. I'm going to do this practice called being. Yeah. We're going to practice being. Okay, well, you can't help it, right? I need willpower to practice being. It may seem as if you do, but you don't really. You can't help it, actually. You know?
Different question.
Mm-hmm.
So, earlier he said, I can't, concentrate, but I used to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But I've kind of taken a different approach to that. So the mind is always going to have thoughts. I've kind of accepted it. So I'm saying, for me, meditation is not about not having thoughts. It's about every thought that comes, I'm observing. Sometimes I get carried away, and the act of catching myself back. Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's longer.
Yes.
It's also meditation. So then I've taken out this vocabulary of I can't concentrate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking.
Is my understanding correct?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, nevertheless, of course, you can say, right? You can redefine concentration as saying, like, let's say your ability to bring thoughts on average back faster, right? Yes, you can say that.
But you have to change the thought, and then you won't think about it next time.
No, we can't control it. You can't control it.
It will happen. It comes back, and then you just watch it and
actually, Aurobindo said this, right? When he said when you're watching thoughts, like he said, don't be in the thought, be out of it. So that's
why you watch.
Sometimes you get into it.
Yeah, you get into it, but you just out of it and come out of it when you get a chance.
Something you said just yesterday, I was listening to Deepak Chopra, and he kind of said, he did an experiment with this podcast guy. He said, okay, I'll give you an experiment. tell me what's the next thought is going to be.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And
Exactly.
nobody could answer.
Nobody
it.
Yeah.
Nobody knows it.
That's it. And then when they say, oh, you don't know where it's going to come from, it's just going to come.
Yeah.
Just, no
Yeah,
question.
that's
But
your
see,
big
that's not
analogy.
opposite. I'm
Yeah.
not going to have a thought.
100%.
He's also a thought, right?
Yeah.
So meta. I mean, you're talking about awareness of awareness, right? That's what I was.
Yeah. So
Which is-
I didn't come back to that.
Yeah.
So where is it, so the reason I don't like, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I don't love this phraseology of being aware of awareness, because what happens is that people think I'm aware of awareness, but by our definitions, right? If you're aware of something, that can't be you, right?
Yeah.
What you're looking for is you,
Yeah.
right?
No, I'm okay with that. But
So-
I'm just saying I'll renew that awareness of awareness every minute. Every second I'm going to renew the awareness of
But
awareness.
well, I mean, the
But
problem
it lets me be absorbed back into
yeah, I mean,
something other than thought.
You can say that, but the thing is, what it is, you just recognize that what you're being absorbed into is another thought.
Yes,
Yeah.
I do. So then I say,
Thought behind it.
so what all I'm saying is this awareness of awareness is just a way to
phrase the same thing.
phrase the same
Okay,
thing.
if you want to think of it that way, it's fine.
That's all it is.
Yes. Because what happens is that people they start to they think of this thing called awareness as this
Yes.
very subtle
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
like this, like this feeling. I'm aware.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is awareness. You know.
Actually, Eckhart Tolle,
Yeah.
when he talks about it, is a little confusing because he talks about presence, right? And you realize
Yes.
presence, and so then what's
Yes.
presence?
Yes, same
So
problem.
presence is the same thing, right?
But,
I mean,
so let me try to put it differently. I have the same challenge, which is that I'm aware of a thought. I'm aware of the thought that I'm aware of a thought.
Yeah.
It feels like in software we call it recursion. It's
Yeah,
not.
sure.
It's not two levels.
Yeah.
It's like multiple levels of that.
Yeah, well, that's why I would want you to look for I, because that's your landmark, right? Like your own, like you think it's recursive. In a way, it is recursive, but it's also really coming back to the base level point, right? Which is I have a base experience of myself, so that's what I'm really coming back to. What is the? It's not just what's aware of this, what's aware of this, what's aware of this. It's that
Yeah.
I currently have an experience of my so-called presence or so-called awareness or whatever it's called, right? That's what I'm trying to find. So it's always back to that. That's the mountain, right? I'm looking for the mountain. It's right there. I'm walking towards it. I'm seeing a lot of other things. I'm always walking towards that mountain, which is, again, me.
and then there's the other thing, right? I am, like you said in surrender, there's just beingness. So beingness is also I am without you not being anything in particular. I'm not.
Yes.
I'm not a person. I don't know who I am, what I am, but I am.
Yes.
So if you make that assertion, it's like what Nisargadatta Maharaj, I think he said. He went with the I amness route instead of the who am I route.
Well.
So is that also like a surrender thing, right? I'm just in beingness.
No. Again, I wouldn't use that phraseology because again, even with surrender, right? So even with surrender, what's happening, right, is you are continuously taking your attention away from the objects, right? So what that means is, as you take your attention away from what's experienced, what is experienced will become subtler, meaning it becomes more like quieter, okay? Whatever that is, then you are bringing your attention away from that. So there's a movement, right?
Okay.
Surrender is just like inquiry in the sense that it's a movement away from objects towards what is not the object. So rather than saying, for example, this is the problem with any, any way station. Anytime you say, like, "Oh, I am just
it's
via,"
static, like
it's static.
It's static. Okay.
You don't want to ever stop and say, now I'm here.
Now I'm here.
Now I'm going
right.
to rest here. I'm going to rest in this. Whatever you're resting in is a thought.
Is a thought.
Yeah. So in surrender, you're continuously moving away from that, away from that, away from that, away from that. In the same way. Just like again, it's exactly parallel to inquiry, right? Yeah.
So this concept of triputi, right? So there's the subject, object, and the experience that's connecting them. So is it correct to say that what you're saying is to unblend from the object, unblend from the experience, but immediately the mind and ego will create another triputi?
Yes.
Right? So now you observe that triputi and you unblend from that and you keep doing that.
Yes,
So
you can say that. Sure. Yes, you can do it that way. Exactly.
But then identifying that subtler triputi is a challenge.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
because
so
as you go forward, the triputis will become subtler and subtler and subtler.
Right.
But on the other hand, you will also be in a greater position. Your powers of concentration will increase. So you're going to be better able to deal with it.
So the more silent and calm the mind is, only then you will be able to observe those subtle triputis,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So it's
That's
kind
right.
of proportional to how
Yes.
calm and silent your mind is.
Yes, and it's not just about your calm and silent mind this particular second, right? But rather, it's how calm and silent your whole mental structure is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
So it's, the analogy I give is, right, it's like if you go to the gym, right, and you work out really hard for 20 minutes, like as hard as you possibly can, right? That's fine, but it's not going to do very much if the other 23 and a half hours a day, you're sitting down and eating donuts, right? Like, it's your whole lifestyle contributes to that.
So question about those 20 minutes. Question about those 20 minutes I'm working hard. Question about let's say the 1 hour of meditation.
Yeah.
So there are various types of meditation. I know about TM, I know about focusing on your breathing, I know about japa, I know about vipassana, just learning about kundalini. Your thoughts on the different kinds of meditation?
I mean, all of them are fine because they all help quiet the mind. Surrender and self-inquiry are different than the others because they're not about specific objects. They are movements away from all objects, right? So they have an element of what I call like discernment in them, progressive discernment.
No, to do any of these meditations, make it get there faster.
The meditations will help you get there faster if and only if you cannot do self-inquiry or surrender because your mind is too noisy for it in various ways. Then do these other things to help you prepare, I would say. Yeah.
So these are the two techniques from Ramana Maharshi
Yes.
to go deeper into
Yes,
yourself.
exactly. Yes, precisely.
Sorry, what is the question?
So
these are two Ramana Maharshi techniques, basically.
I wanted to know which technique Ramana Maharshi has.
Ramana Maharshi gave the direct path.
Directly.
So you had a question?
My question is when you had your experience of going in deeper, this is how you went through your path?
Yes.
So how long you had to do it? How many years?
He said 1 second, if the desire is strong.
That's true, actually.
See,
I view it as,
I'll give it in you.
at a very minimum, right? Like, I view it as my whole path, right? I wouldn't view it as whatever the last bit when I was doing it the most intensely was set up by the whole path before that. So, even if we're just looking at this lifetime, I would say, 30 years, right? Minimum, right? But really, if you, of course, look at the scriptures, of course, they would say previous lifetimes contributed,
Correct.
right? So,
Already you have some intuition into going into this.
Yes, because it said in the Gita very clearly, right? Even to wish to hear of the spiritual, even the merest desire to hear of the spiritual, you have to have had countless lives of meritorious deeds.
Yeah.
Even to be blessed with that,
And then to come in contact with teachers.
Rukmini says, Rukmini Kalyanam, before that, she writes a love letter to Krishna. She says, if you come and marry me, I am your devotee and all the time I am thinking of you. And if you do not come and marry me, then what will happen? It's fine. 10,000, 1,000 janmas I take also, I will be aligned with you. The whole thing is, it doesn't matter. Even now I am aligned with you. And I will continue to be aligned with you. 1,000 years I will be aligned with you only. Like that. Then if you want, you come and take me now. Otherwise I will wait. Even for 50 years,
Except that we never know whether it's the first stop or the last stop.
Right.
So like even if you take Rudram, what does it say? You will see like Rudra, you see me countless birth and death, going through the cycle I am going through, and you have been witnessing me, going through, and you are taking me, removing me because your job is to destroy, like your job is to clean up, So you clean me up and then I come back and you clean me up. Like that keeps on going, and then I am endless cycle. But what I'm not going to bother about when I will reach, break the cycle.
That's the wisest thing.
What I can do right now is I'll be aligned with you, series of birth, no problems.
Yeah.
All you can do is align with that.
That's the smartest way of dealing with it because the reality is, right? See, it's like it's like someone said, right? I can't who. The point is, it's not something you can accomplish entirely on your own, right? The ocean cannot be crossed entirely by your effort. It cannot be, right? So it would take you unlimited lives, right? If it was just up to your effort.
Yeah.
Obviously, God has to intervene.
But
So you just put forth your effort, and then at some point God intervenes.
Right. Look at that. Moral is that Ramana has said you need three things to become self-realized. You're already there, he said, but to become,
that's right.
One is God's grace, he said, everybody has it. He said, everybody has God's grace, you cannot question that. Number 2 is patience, you wait for your time. Number 3 is effort, you keep on doing the work, one day you will get it. That's it, this is the 3 things he said.
Correct, absolutely correct.
So the question really is,
then what is effort?
Effort is this inquiry.
Inquiry and
For him it's inquiry.
16:8, exactly.
16:8.
So I said 24/7.
Self-inquiry and
or surrender.
Surrender.
One or the other.
One
or
or the other.
Or a mixture. Or a mixture. You know.
Just before go to sleep, tell yourself.
So
Yes.
while you're doing surrendering, things goes off, and your thoughts are going off. So till now I haven't reached to that state where I can see the self. So what was that state, and how long that person will be in that state, and maybe your experience if you wanna share. What is that state?
That state can't
when
really.
you are zero thoughts.
See, it's I mean, see, the truth is it can't be expressed is the real truth. You know, look, it's. Whatever it is, it's immediately paradoxical to talk about it. Yeah.
Even having the thought that you have no thought
It's
takes
a
you
thought.
out of from the
Well,
self.
there's no out of it. You see, the truth is there's no such thing as out of it. You cannot actually leave the self. You never leave the self, is the truth. Nobody leaves it. No, there's nobody to leave the self in that sense.
So what I understood is it's a constant motion you have to be in. There is no start-stop.
The mind of the seeker is attempting to be in constant motion. But the end of the process will be the mind that you think is there isn't there at all.
Can you repeat that?
Whatever you think you are is not exist in the way that you think it does. That's the point.
Yeah.
Right? So right now it seems like you have a mind, for example. Like it's a facade, actually. Right? It's like a again, all metaphors and analogies, right? There's an actor reads a script, okay? They pretend they're a character. Now, the character that they are pretending to be says, I'm thinking right now. I'm thinking about what I should do tomorrow. Question is, does such a character actually exist, and do they have a mind? No, obviously not. There's an actor reading the script, right? There's no such thing as a character. That's a hypothetical construct that's viewed by an outside observer. Oh, there's a character. The audience constructs an imaginary thing called a character based on the actor saying lines. So your mind is like that. It's a virtual construct.
So you're always in that character mode, but you're the actual actor.
The analogies themselves break down. You know, I give this analogy as well to give you a sense. And speaking of recursion, right? I mean, you know, it's the mind cannot grasp. The mind cannot grasp actual truth. What the actual truth is, the mind cannot grasp. Why? Because the mind is a product of it. It's a product of it. But you know, one metaphor I like to give you a sense, right? Is it's like there's a book, okay, and it's being read by someone, right? So the tendency in it might be like, oh, I'm not the character in the book, I'm the reader, sort of similar ways, I'm the actor, right? But really, the reader of that book is a character in a second book. Okay. the reader themselves a character in a second book. They are a character in a second book. The second book is talking about someone reading a first book. Okay? And there's a reader of that second book, and that reader's in the third book. And it's books all the way down. It's books all the way down. That's why they say Maya is anadi, right?
Yes.
So it's you can't conceive of what's actually happening. There's no ground reality of an object type. You see, there's not like a thing. There's not a thing which grounds everything. What is actually there is not a thing.
So this is like the ultimate deconstruction.
Yeah, it is the ultimate deconstruction. But interesting, it's ultimate deconstruction, but at the same time, it's also immediately experienced.
Yeah,
which
the
is interesting.
deconstruction can happen just like that also.
You're saying you cannot figure it out, but you can sort of
You think that
pierce through it, sort of thing, or you can't really figure out its complexity.
Yeah, it cannot be conceptualized, that's for sure. But what is ironic is, right, through the effort we are deconstructing our usual mode. And when you deconstruct the usual mode, then something else can be said to happen, which we can't explain.
Sounds like quantum physics.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, it's and however you try, right, however you squirm, right, that's why I always say, like, there's a reason the scriptures are written in this mystical, enigmatic way, because it doesn't matter how much of a genius you are, like, it doesn't matter who you are, you cannot explain the self in words.
And
So,
Bhagavad Gita also, Bhagavan says Gupta Vidya, right? Guhya Vidya.
Yeah.
Like it's a secret. It's like if someone tells me a secret, I
Yeah.
can't tell you in
Exactly,
words. It's a secret.
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But you know it,
Yes.
but you can't put it in the words.
Yes.
So it's a secret.
Exactly.
It's as if it feels like you're keeping it a secret from us.
Yes.
But you're not.
Yeah. It's because it can't be, because as soon as you approach it, right, the closer, it is like a black hole, right? The closer you approach, the less describable it is. But it's nothing out there and far away, that's the thing.
Are
It's
there very
extremely
simple
simple.
examples like if I try to tell you what mango tastes like, there's no way to describe it except that
Yes.
it tastes like.
Yes.
Just like
Yes.
sugar.
Yes.
Sugar.
So you have to
Experience.
transcend logic and intellect.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And we are trying to do logic and intellect
Yes.
right now
Yes.
to
Because that's
You
what-
try to grasp it with logic and
It's
intellect.
very natural.
You
Everyone
cannot.
wants to do it. Everyone wants to do it. And that's
Because that's all we know. That's all we have.
Everyone's trying for that.
No, but we can use the logic and mind to prepare ourselves.
Yes.
That's like I go back to what I've come to. You can prepare to sleep. You can't fall asleep, and sleep can draw you.
And that we do every day.
Exactly.
So you have to prepare yourself for the
That is
Almighty to suck us into.
Yes.
So you are, Raj, you are doing 24/7 because you're in Samadhi though. You're sleeping.
She has a question.
Yeah, so where is God coming here in picture?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, it's a good question. Very good question. I mean, look. I mean, this is I can give you a philosophical explanation. Obviously, I mean, there's it depends what you mean, really. So, in as much as there is, if you say there is a world and people and things happening, and God is clearly the controller of all the objects. There's no question. Ishvara, that's that version of God. But if you want to say we're in the beyond the we've gone beyond these false concepts, right? And then whatever is there, then whatever is remaining, whatever that is, which can't be spoken about, which we can we try to describe, but we can't really describe, is God.
So when we go down, deep down, that's that's it. The final point is
Yes, of
You
course.
and God in
me
being
and
one.
God is
The
That
self
is,
is
you
God,
are-
of course. Yes.
You are God actually.
You are
But,
the
yeah,
God.
but,
That's
yeah,
why when we
but
say
Akilesh,
we are
do you,
God,
in your thing, then
Brahmas.
you still
Aham
have
Brahmas,
the
that's why
experience of
Maha-
Ishvara in your day-to-day
That becomes
Definitely, yes.
So
I mean,
how does that?
well, I mean, I say it's true, but yet I couldn't justify it
Some is I
exactly.
know,
Okay.
because I don't have
Yeah, I would say yes.
Okay.
But you know, but
You can come here.
at the same
I
time,
will do that.
see, it's, whatever is spoken about obviously is in the realm of language.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know,
The sun
and
won't
everything in the
be
realm of language is in some sense false.
You fall in your eyes.
But at the same time, there is God. You know, there's a paradox here. You're touching on a good paradox. You know, again, all these things are touching paradox. There's, you know, the Yoga Vashishta, right?
Yeah.
In the Yoga Vashishta, you know, Rama is educated by Vashishta. You know, he's taught all these things, right? And at the end, he says, you know, he he sits down and he falls into a deep samadhi because he's liberated, right? Of course, he was liberated. Rama.
Yeah.
Of course, he was liberated before. But anyway, let's pretend he was liberated at that moment because of Vashishta's teachings. And then Vashishta, you know, they say, oh, he enters Rama's Sushumna Nadi, you know, and wakes him up, okay? And he says, Rama, you can't be sitting here, speaking of duty, you can't be sitting here in meditation, you have things to do, the whole Ramayana, you know, you have things to do, go and do them. And then Rama says something very interesting. He says, I have no duties of any kind whatsoever, but nevertheless, I should listen to my guru.
Wow.
And he goes on. It doesn't make any sense if you think about it. It doesn't have any logical. There's no logical connection really, right? And he gets up and does things, right? And so this is the idea, right? It doesn't actually. There's a gap, of course. You can't fully understand.
So that guru is very close to the picture of God coming into our life.
Yes, exactly,
We just
exactly.
pray to the God to reach to the self which we want to, because He is the God is the closest to the self.
Yes, of
He's
course.
also not the self.
Of course, praying to God, I should definitely say, 100% very, very helpful. God will help you if you pray, no question. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's the same, almost the same parallel story is told about, you know, Prahlada. You know, it's said, I think maybe in the Yoga Vishta also, but it's said that, you know, Prahlada, right, was so devoted, and after, you know, Narasimha kills Hiranyakashipu, Prahlada also becomes enlightened, and he also sits down and falls into this meditative trance, right? And you know, just samadhi, because I've got no duties anymore. And you know, it's said, I may have said this last year, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It's said that you know, because at that point he was the king of the Ashuras, right? And when the king is at peace, the subjects are at peace. So the Ashuras all fall into samadhi because their king is in samadhi, right? And the Devas, they're basically there to fight the Ashuras. So when the Ashuras are at peace, the Devas are at peace. So they fall into samadhi. And the humans are basically pawns in the war between the Devas and the Ashuras. So when the Devas and Ashuras are at peace, the humans fall into samadhi. And then Vishnu comes over and he says, this is going to lead to the end of the cosmos before its time. So he wakes Prahlada up. He says, you can't just sit here. You have to do things.
Wow.
But he says, but you will go about your duties like a baby half asleep. So it will not feel like any effort to you. You'll just do them like a puppet, basically. You know, your experience will be of samadhi, but your body will be doing things.
Surrender.
Yeah.
Surrender.
One question. How do you decide what to do in your life?
I don't, exactly. That's exactly right. The decisions happen, I would say. I mean, see, it all depends what you mean by that question is the truth, right? I mean, I could speak in a conventional sense, right? We could talk about a particular thing, and I could give you certain explanations, you know, and we could talk at that level. And then there's the truth. So which do you prefer?
My question is that when you start being enlightened, question is what happens?
Yeah.
Do nothing or when this is like
That's
the last
what exactly
question.
now he's like the body.
You are here,
Are you perpetually in inaction and things are just happening through you?
No, see,
Yeah.
see,
Now we
the
cannot
truth
take
is
it
the question
beyond
is
that.
posed wrongly,
I see.
right? That's the issue, right? There's a pre-imposed concept
Okay.
of what we all appear to be. And then based on that wrong concept, this question is asked.
I see.
Right, which would then force me into a series of possible wrong answers, really all the answers. Which are, I mean, because if someone asked me, obviously, a man on the street asked me, like, what are you doing? I mean, I wouldn't say I'm to sell if I could give a conventional answer. Yeah, there are conventional answers, of course, but, but the conventional answers are wrong, ultimately, that's all, they're misleading, just like,
what other answer, not conventional,
yeah, the non-conventional answer is silence, that's the only non-conventional answer, yeah. Because none of us are here in the way that we appear to be here. So it is like asking, like I think you were saying, or who was saying, you're talking about the mirage. Who was talking about the mirage? Mirage, right? Yeah, the depth of the water in a mirage. Well, how deep is it? Is it 1 inch deep or 6? There's no water in the mirage, right? So how can you ask that question? Really, there's no such thing as water in a mirage.
So now, is it like whatever we are seeing may not be true? I mean, it's not true maybe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So this table.
Yeah.
Is this true? Is it here or not? Like if I touch, I feel it. So that's why I get the confirmation that it's here. So now, what's the truth?
Well, the truth is that the conceptual framework within which you ask that question is wrong. That's really what the truth is. In other words, your whole way of thinking about the whole situation is wrong. And it's so wrong that I can't even tell you in what way it's wrong, because it's wrong from top to bottom, left to right. Right? It's completely wrong. Right? So it's not that this either exists or doesn't exist. It's that there's something which is so deeply rooted in your way of looking at the whole thing that it's the whole thing is a mess, basically, from the very bottom. It's not just you, but generally speaking, right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's not that it is or isn't. I can say that I can give lots of answers. I can say it's here provisionally, but it isn't really real. I can say that at a certain level it's real, but it's not, right? But the actual answer can only be gotten if you say, well, who am I in relationship to this, right? The one who asks the question, right? We don't know who that one is. And if you look for the one who is aware of the question, then it will lead to a destruction of the whole framework. Yeah.
See, in Ulladhan Arpadu, there is an answer for this question.
Tell me, what's...
See, the Ulladhan Arpadu says, is there any... If beyond me is there time and space, then answer is that if you are the body, there is time and space. And if you are not the body, and if there is time, there is space, there is no such thing, only you are there. I am not translating properly in the Tamil.
Basically the same idea. Yes. Yeah, absolutely, of course, 100%. It's tricky because all the language is wrong in the end. It's not. You're not neither this nor that. You can't be said. Yeah. Because words are wrong. That's the basic problem. All right, so let's sort of conclude. Let's do one more, let's say, 10-minute meditation, and we'll discuss, and then we can call it. We can bring this to an end. Yeah. So
I can go back here. The sun.
He just left.
No, but the sun is gone.
So
he left already.
Oh, that's right. He left.
He said he's leaving.
So what I would suggest is
Raj also left. Raj, no, he's doing something.
Opening her eyes here.
I would always suggest open eyes if you can. If you cannot, or you really prefer to close your eyes, go ahead and close your eyes.
So I tried surrender, and of course the first things I was noticing was audio. I mean the sounds around me, and then I was ignoring the sounds, and then the imagery of the whole thing, right? Because my eyes were open. So I was taking the whole imagery in the house, the trees, all of you sitting here. And I was constantly disengaging, but that imagery kept coming. And all I did was kept re-engaging. And with it came a thought that, hey, am I failing at this? Because it keeps coming again and again, right? The same imagery kept coming because my eyes was open.
Yes, of course.
And I kept trying to not engage with that imagery and just going into a sort of a stupid way of just looking at it, type of thing, without any, and then just a sort of a stupid alertness, without, feeling stupidly looking at it, type of thing. that seemed to help a bit. But then again, the same imagery kept coming. And then of course some thoughts came, and which I disengaged. But I think the thought kept coming, am I doing it right? That's kind of giving me points on how well I'm doing or I'm not doing, right? And of course I disengaged from that thought as well, but I think that was sort of the overall kind of a thing. So yeah, so I just like your thoughts on if anything I should fine tune here, something that I should do better, or any tips?
It sounds great. I mean, look, so, of course the visual imagery is not going to disappear, right? So that's certainly not going to happen if your eyes are open. It's simply that, I think we're basically doing the right thing, which is just not becoming lost in it. That's the only thing, right? It really is like, true with visual imagery, true with everything, right, in surrender. It's like every moment you're being presented with a photograph, okay? Every second. And your task is simply to notice that it's a photograph. There's a border on the photograph, You don't want to forget that it's photographed, essentially, Another way of looking at it, by the way, is, it's like, it's a little bit like, there's a certain degree to which I think this is true. You have a muscle within your mind, in a sense, which is like a focusing muscle, okay? So one way of looking at surrender is you are vigilantly relaxing that focusing muscle. So you're defocusing on everything, except you're protecting that state of defocusing. You continuously defocus. So that's a way of looking at it,
Okay.
Just like, on those old cameras, when you turn the dial a certain way, like you have to focus the lens, but if it's the wrong way, then it's like everything is blurry, right? So you deliberately drop into this out of focusedness, except that you're focusing on that, keeping that up.
Okay.
That's what you're doing. Does it make sense?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a way of looking at it. Oh, go ahead,
Thank you.
Yeah, like I was trying to see the observer of the experienced observer of my silence. Right? Then I said I feel the silence, and the silence, that observer has to be within my like I'm feeling it in my heart. That is maybe it's with the heart, but I feel it only sometime, right? So it may not be the heart, or I say maybe my brain is making me understand the feeling. There's a teamwork involved, my heart as well as brain and my breathing. So how do I experience the observer? The experience is hidden.
So notice, right? So you said, I feel it in my brain, maybe I feel it in my heart. Perhaps they're working together.
Or my breath is always there, so it's making me do. And my silence is there. When the silence comes, then my observer is there. So so it is kind of coinciding with the silence, right? The silence is always there. So the observer is somewhere in, I feel it, that means it's my heart, kind of like originating from my heart or something like that, I feel. So, and also it cannot be all the time in there, because my breathing is also helping me, and also my brain is also helping me feel it. So all three combined together, and it's my observer experience. I'm experiencing all these three things, so it's kind of combined with them. So my observer has to be experienced this way.
So let me ask you. So when you say, for example, like my head, my heart, and my breath, right? Are you aware of those three things?
Yeah, I feel when I am really I feel the silence, and then going beyond the silence, right? So that means the feeling is really deep in my heart. That's
so if it's a feeling, if you feel the feeling, right? So what you have to ask yourself is, if I feel the feeling, can I be that?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. Then I said,
well,
it cannot. It's
cannot
not that
correct.
alone.
Yes.
It's a combined effect.
Combined effect is it's clever, but it's a concept.
Yeah.
You see, are you aware of that concept?
I don't know. I'm trying to.
Well, you hear what I'm saying when I say, are you aware of that concept? Like literally, are you aware of that concept? You are, right? Clearly.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's a
Yeah,
thought,
I
basically.
am aware.
So you have to view that is a thought, right? This idea of together, they come, because this is what the mainstream idea is, in fact, right? The mainstream idea is, what are we? We are a product of our brain. Our brain works together and creates I, right? But this is not the spiritual truth. What you're looking for is, in this case, is you're looking again and again, right, at in my experience again, right? So what's happening is, it's very understandable, right? You're like, oh, it's not any of these things individually, it must be them working together. But the idea of them working together is an idea.
Yeah.
Okay, what you're looking for is not an idea. What you're looking for is your direct experience of yourself, which cannot be a concept. There's a concept. You see what I'm saying? There's a thought. These things work together, they create me, or they are the observer, or something like that. That thought can't be you. That thought cannot be you. What you're looking for is how you directly, concurrently, already know that you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, does it make sense why the concept doesn't work?
Yeah.
Does that make
Concept
sense?
doesn't work, but how do I go further?
You again and again have to hunt in your experience. Because again, for example, you have the concept, like, oh, it's all these three things working together. In that moment when you have that thought, you are observing that thought.
Yeah.
And you know yourself as the observer of that thought.
Yeah.
So that self-awareness right now, you're touching yourself.
Yeah.
In the moment of that thought.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When you know that thought, you know when you know anything, right? Whether you know it's a table or a thought, right? You know simultaneously several things. You know the thing, for example, a thought or a table. And you also know you're not the thing.
Yeah.
And you also know you.
Yeah.
As the not the thing, who is aware of that, right? That last piece is something of which you are, you're in touch. You're in touch with that.
Yeah, I know that.
Right. So that piece you have to. I mean, I know it's not easy, but again and again, and it becomes extremely difficult as it becomes subtler. But your job is to relentlessly try to feel into that, while at the same time, as soon as you feel anything, as soon as you think this is it, you have to relentlessly, again and again, say, am I aware of this? If I'm aware of this, this cannot be me. I'm aware of it. Who's the one who's aware? Right? Again and again and again, you have to come to, there's something which I am, which is not this. How do I know I am? That's all I can say. Again and again and again and again and again. And this has to be done all the time, because as it gets subtler and subtler, what is stopping, what the barrier is always remaining attachments. Lack of clarity is always because of remaining attachments. So if you want to penetrate this, you have to be constantly attending to this question in the face of your attachments, which is why we say all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just like for example, if you had you were thinking of a math problem, a complicated math problem, right? You're constantly fixated on that, like some absent-minded professor, right? As you go throughout the day, you're just constantly thinking of that, or you're a bhakta, right? Thinking of God all the time, right? This is what you need. So the vigilance, your attention should always be on that. Everything else is like irrelevant background. So that's
so then I reach a point where I cannot think anymore.
Well, you reach a point where you can't seem to get beyond it, I think is what you're saying, right? You reach a wall. It doesn't matter. You have to keep looking. So you have to hit that wall. It's like, the way I see it is, it's like a door, okay? So there's a door. You get to the door, you can't seem to go beyond the door. The reason you cannot go beyond the door is because you have 100 people with ropes behind you pulling you back. Those are the attachments, okay? But you keep knocking on the door over and over and over again, continuously, and then slowly the ropes start snapping, okay? And eventually the door will open, okay?
Yeah.
So my experience was, I tried self-inquiry, and I was like, okay, who am I? I'm trying to figure it out, and I felt like there was someone else who was looking through my eyes,
Mhm,
and I
mhm.
felt that. And then for a very small fraction of second, I felt like there's someone else.
Mhm.
And then I'm like, go find it out.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Then I went, and then I felt like suddenly I felt like I'm very insignificant because I felt like I'm an instrument,
Mhm.
and there is a bigger boss inside me
Mhm.
actually. And then I felt like I'm just an instrument, and that is a feeling that I
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's like like a little glimpse, basically, you might say.
Yeah.
You suddenly had a sense of your own, what you thought you were.
Yes.
You see, what you thought you were being insignificant. You see,
Yeah.
whereas what you actually are is different. So you get a little tiny whiff of that, basically.
Wow.
And in the morning,
You got that whip already. I'm happy that I was here when you happened.
She's been practicing very hard for a while.
Really?
And the meditation we did in the beginning,
Mhm.
the 5-minute meditation, I guess, the first time I tried open-eyed. So in that I tried the other one, which is like surrender. And then my mind was, because I was looking over there, and my mind was like, the same thing happened, which was zooming in and zooming out.
Mhm.
Because I felt like my vision was zooming in and zooming out, and I felt like I blended there
Mhm.
in the plant.
Mhm.
And then again I had to remind myself, like you said, that the doorbell
Yes.
knocking.
Yes.
And
Bring
then I
yourself back
reminded
home.
myself, and again it like became focused.
Uh-huh.
And again I felt like, maybe I was meditating, I don't know, but it was my eyes were open, and again I blended, again I was like knocking and coming out. So it was like zooming in, zooming out, like the camera thing happened.
Great. Yeah, that makes exactly. So you just keep that up, or one or the other, or both, and you can go back and forth. You can go. Some people are oriented more towards surrender. Some people are oriented more towards self-inquiry. Some people are mixed. So
Okay.
yeah, that makes sense.
I
Exactly.
thought like maybe I'm not attentive, so I maybe zoomed out or like blended. Then I thought to come back attention.
Yeah.
come
So
back.
you lost yourself in the plant, and then you brought yourself back, and you
Yeah.
lost yourself again, and then you brought yourself back. Right? Is what it sounds like.
Yeah. So that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Exactly. So you just want to keep that up, right? Want to keep that up continuously, if you can, or as much as you can. As much as you can, basically, is the point.
So you become the plant. Actually, that's the.
Well, if you lose yourself in the experience, we don't want to lose ourselves in the experience.
Actually, you don't feel it what you were.
You don't want. You do not want to lose yourself in
Yeah.
it.
That also you don't know.
Don't know.
Don't know.
Do you see what I'm
Because there
saying?
is no.
Yeah.
Well, just to be clear, right? You don't want to lose yourself in the experience, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in the plant, that then you're not in yourself, so to say. So we want to take our attention back, like the doorbell.
Yeah.
So yeah.
For a few seconds, I didn't know like where I was going,
Ah.
because I didn't know if I was there or not there, right? But then at some point, the thing came that okay,
Yes.
maybe you're lost. Come back.
Yeah, this is the Nirvritir Sabanti in Patanjali, where you're completely merged with it, and there's no subject object.
Correct.
Yeah.
The subject, the object, and the observer are all fused. That is the,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, it is Savitarka Samadhi.
Or maybe Prakriti.
Or
le
Savichara
Samadhi.
Samadhi.
Prakriti le
Huh?
Samadhi.
Prakriti le Samadhi.
In Patanjali terminology.
Yeah.
Prakriti le Samadhi.
Okay.
Patanjali says.
Okay.
You
I
and the
see.
mountain are exactly the same.
Okay.
You became
But
a
you
mountain.
don't-
But what Akilesh is saying is you have to extract it.
Yeah. We don't want to fall into it.
Yeah.
And it's also tricky. It's interesting, right? Anyway, it gets off topic, right? Where what is there's some superficial similarities between samadhi and just zoning out, which is not the same thing, But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, you want to own your attention and just guard it as a precious resource. One way I describe surrender sometimes is it's like you're royalty, okay, and your job is just to sit on the throne and relax, okay? And meanwhile, around you, there's 100 people basically being like, come do this, do that, you need to do this, like they're trying to scare you or tempt you or somehow make you get up from the throne and do something, right? And your job is just ignore them, basically.
I think
That's what I was trying to practice.
That's the hard part.
I think you've given us 2 or 3 interesting techniques to get into it. One was the muscle
Yes. Defocusing.
Defocusing muscle.
Yeah.
And then the other one is this is, yeah, I like this also.
Sitting
So,
on the
but
throne.
the defocusing, so what I was trying to do was I said, okay, let me practice surrender. And then I was actually trying to take in, contrary to what Raj said, I was trying to include all the sounds around me. Initially, I closed my eyes, so then it was just sounds, sensations, right? Sounds and my bodily sensations. So I was just trying to take in everything, and then of course the thoughts and feelings bubbling up. And I found my attention coming from here, like as if I'm attending to everything from my heart. From here. So it was, the location was here, in the sense that, like the eye location was.
You felt like it was here.
Yeah, it was. I felt like it was here. And then of course there were thoughts coming in, and I said, okay, I tried to basically just hold the space for everything. That's what I was trying to do. That's what I ended up doing. I don't know if that. So then there's another thought came up. It's like, what are you doing? Are you doing surrender? What the heck are you doing? Then another thought is like, who cares? I'm chill. And then it was like, who cares? I'm chill. I'm chill. I'm not caught up in anything. Right? So that was the idea, that I'm like, okay, I'm chill. And then I said, okay, let me open my eyes. And I opened the eyes and I just looked around at just everything, and I'm just looking. There's a chair, there's this, there's that, there's this person, that person. So it was like, I wasn't getting any, I was trying to kind of just be there. Like in the sense that again, I think in, like Raj was saying, in Patanjali, there is the Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara. So there's different levels, right, of practice, where you're trying not to reject anything. Like everything is included. Everything that's happening is I'm being with everything. But I don't know if that's surrender.
Well, there's definitely an element of that in surrender, right? So again, like I said before, right, in surrender, you're not trying to reject anything or force anything out. So in that sense, it's 100% compatible, right? Yes, everything can come. You're like the sky, you're like space, right? Allowing everything to come. The only difference, though, is with surrender, I would say, you're trying to, metaphor I often use is like, it's like there's like a television on, okay? And you're not trying to turn the television off. And you're not even trying to change the channel.
Right.
You're just trying to not get sucked into watching the TV, right? So you're trying not to like be hypnotized by it.
So then I'm busy doing something else.
That's
how I'm not getting sucked into.
Right, and so here you're busy. The only thing you're doing is you're busy not being sucked in.
You're
busy withdrawing your attention. See, the thing is, of course, when you withdraw your attention, what happens is that you think you withdraw your attention, and it turns out you're actually watching another TV.
Yes, exactly.
So
that's what
now you have to withdraw your attention from that
so
TV.
I did not try to withdraw my attention from anything. I was just trying this practice of just including
You can experiment. But fundamentally, right, so I mean, you can experiment and nothing wrong with that. But I will say, right, you'll see, right, if you for example, try this and you also completely relax your willpower, okay? If you completely relax your willpower with respect to everything that's happening, okay, you will automatically see that you will have to withdraw your attention in the process. If you relax your willpower, you will have to defocus, because if you let yourself go, unless you're keeping some distance, you have to keep a distance. If you're absorbing everything, it's fine, so long as there is also a thought that this is unreal. You see?
But this
is unreal.
Unreal.
Yeah. As long as that thought is there, if that thought is guarding you, then it's fine. Then you have a distance. You see, you have not been totally absorbed. If you become totally absorbed in the thing without that accompanying thought that this is unreal, then you take it to be real. If you take it to be real, then of course you're going to use your willpower. Because if there's a fire, then you're going to use your willpower to run away from it. Because you take it to be real.
So what do you mean by take it to be real?
Take it to be real means you believe it to be truly occurring, right? So what feels like you, what feels like your effort, what feels like your attention, you direct it in a certain way to influence what you do in the world. Basically.
So you're basically saying that the observer is at work, like there is an extra entity, like an observer that's saying I'm seeing this or I'm hearing this. Like, is that what you're saying? Rather than like if you take whatever is coming in, if you take it to not be real, then you're removing the observer.
Well, let's use a metaphor. Okay, there's a movie going on. Okay, and you know, on the movie screen there's a tsunami. Okay, so if you take the tsunami to be real, then you run out of the theater because it's actually coming at you. If you keep in mind that it's a movie, then you don't.
Okay, so I was basically in this place where, okay, let the thought come, whatever is happening, let it happen. Whatever is happening is just happening.
Yeah,
let it happen. So I wasn't rejecting anything. I wasn't attracting.
That's
anything.
fine as long as you'll have to experiment, right? But basically, the point is, can you relax your willpower or not? Can you feel like, what feels like me is not going to lift a finger. Basically, I'm going to relax and I'm going to guard my relaxation. If you can stay in that guarded, relaxed state, allowing whatever to happen around you without worrying about it, or even if there's worries, let worries come. Those can also come. But you don't have to worry about the worries, basically. You can let them be. And what feels like you is not being involved. That you're guarding what feels like you. The body and mind can do whatever they want, but what feels like you is not being involved. That's the key point.
Okay, great. I'm going for a family get together next weekend. That's when I'll practice.
Yeah.
Yes. Good time to practice.
Yes.
So talking about that.
They can do whatever they want to do. I'm just
I'm going to be in similar situations.
I like your movie analogy.
Yes.
There's a tsunami in the movie. You don't run away from the theater.
Yes.
So in life, this life which feels real. If somebody is yelling at me, I can say it's not real and not be affected. But if a car is racing towards me, I can't say it's not real.
Well, if a car is racing towards you, you can still let the body and mind do what they do. It's the point is what feels like you is not actually in control. That's the point. You think that if you surrender, you're going to stand in the road and let the truck run you over. But I assure you, almost certainly that's not the case. You will find yourself running off the road, whether you like it or not. Yeah. Your body mind will automatically force you off the road, unless you're suicidal, okay, which is a different issue. But basically, you won't have any control over that. People think, I'm just going to do nothing, but it's very hard to do nothing.
Yes.
Unless that's your character. They're like, I'm going to sit on the bed for the next 36 hours. You try that. You see how that goes. I bet you won't be able to.
Yeah,
so,
you pull out your phone, you turn on the TV.
Yeah, you're gonna
book to read.
The force of habit will compel you. This is what Krishna says at the end of the Gita. He says, Arjuna, you think you're not going to fight. Let me assure you, you are going to fight. Because your nature will compel you. Yeah. You don't really have a choice in the matter. So, the same thing is true for all of us.
So, Akilesh, when you practice this intensely, did you carry on that practice when you were watching TV, for example, were you practicing surrender when you were watching TV? What did you see happening? I mean, or did you stay away from certain activities, or did you indulge in activities but practice surrender and inquiry through them?
No, I think I practiced as much as I could. Basically, I think there are probably times when I tried to practice during TV watching or whatever it was. But I think I do have to say the reality is I think when it becomes very intense, attachments get broken, right? So when we're weakened, whatever. So the point is, when you're very fiercely, I need the truth, then you're like
automatically
less things happen because you're not interested in that anymore. You're like, I want to focus on this, So kind of like
it's more weakening.
The framework changes. It's just not as compelling,
Yeah.
There's no pleasure in pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way that's true actually.
The pleasure is not having that.
Also in the yogic thing, it's called paravairagya. Paravairagya is when vairagya happens on its own because you've tasted something else. So then there is no forced vairagya anymore.
Can we break for our...
Yes, let's break. I think we're all done. I'll just advise you by the way, over the course of this week, I don't know, over the course of the week, I really suggest you all try this as much as you can. Watch what happens, and then bring it to the next session so you can talk about it.
So in terms of practice, again, do maximum as you can. That's
as much as you can, and if you can't do this, do karma yoga.
Retain now, right?
Karma yoga. So okay.
So the meditations you're doing in the morning.
In the morning,
yes. What kind of?
We'll just do something and surrender, just like this. Same thing. That's all.